Hi and welcome to Magic Numbers. This is episode number 176, and today we're going to talk about right cards for the right draft decks in Lorwyn Eclipsed. And by that I mean we're going to try to find best homes for each card. Sometimes it's going to be very obvious, sometimes it's not so obvious, and it's exactly those situations where it's not super obvious, where maybe there are things that we are missing in the format, and maybe it's good to know if you want to get that extra edge, maybe before the directs over this weekend, because in Sealed you will often have to play cards that are not exactly 100% on the plan for the deck. You won't get deck with like 18 elves and all the elves payoffs, so maybe you have to play cards in elves decks that you normally don't think are that great in them. And it's then good to know which cards are those. The ones that maybe look more like Kithkin, but would fit in the Elves decks. And before we go into that, thanks very much to, first of all, my patrons. And I have a couple of them to report. We have Fabio and Christian, who updated their memberships to a higher tier, which is great. And we have William and Matthew, who are absolutely new patrons. So welcome, Matthew and William. Just a reminder, if you want to join the Patreon, there are some perks. One of them includes the question of the week that, as a new patron, you can always ask, and I'm happy to answer. And with that, we can move on to the episode. And before we go actually into the episodes, this is the first for me, but one of my students that I'm coaching, because I'm also coaching, if you're interested, you can ping me. We've been chatting about how to make my presentations easier to generate. And as a side project that I didn't ask for, but I'm super glad he did, he created an AI tool that basically makes my presentation for this specific episodes, and it can generate it relatively quickly. Like in 5 minutes, I have something that normally took me 4 hours to do, which is great because it still shows the same numbers, but it generates the slides and finds card pictures that I don't have to manually input, which is fantastic for me because it saves me a lot of time that I don't have. And if I can focus on thinking what to be talking about during the presentation rather than mindlessly putting pictures from Scryfall into the presentations, great for me. So big shout out to Tim, who was helping me with making those slides. Well, and by helping I mean literally made them. So kudos to him. Okay, so today's preamble is macro strategies change between formats. And I'm going to be talking about it throughout the episodes, but just to give you a taster for the starters. This format has been very complicated to figure out properly. And there are as many solutions for drafting this format as there are content creators. I had the pleasure of working with Team Cosmos for preparation for the Pro Tour, and even inside of the team, we had people with diverse strategies. Should I pick the elves early and just continue drafting them? Replace elves with Merfolk or Kithkin or whatever? Or should I stay open? Or should I stay semi-open? Should I draft the hard way? Should I force? Everyone has different answers to that. And I think that something that is not appreciated is that strategy is often given as a one-size-fits-all in terms of the sets. But I think that different formats will require you to have a different balance of forcing or weaving between colors, depending on what is the power level of the cards, what is the top end of the cards, how good are the commons, for example. For me, at least, in this format, the best strategy so far was to pick very powerful cards as early as possible. If I open, let's say, an elf rare, and I pick it because it's a busted elf rare, and then second pack I don't see anything outstanding for elves, maybe some kind of a filler card is there, I'm happy to pick like an Eclipsed Marrow and have something that has nothing to do with my first pick. I'd rather hedge my bets, but only for those cards of the absolute highest quality. We're going to see which cards are those when we are looking through the slides today, and focus on those busted rares and which ones are the busted of the busted. But this has worked for me. In the end, you'll find some kind of a strategy. The weird side effect for me in this format is that I have not trophied with the Typal deck so far. I have trophied with a Grixis deck, with a Boros deck and with a Gruul deck so far. And I didn't play many drafts, so that's my problem. I didn't have time to play. I only had time to try to understand this format. But it is a weird side effect because maybe I don't end up in the most broken version of the Typal deck because of my strategy. However, I very often end up in the non-supported color pair, which can compete with the Typal decks. And that's why I managed to trophy with those. So a weird kind of corollary of the strategy that I selected. However, I do know good players, like really good players, who have decided that this format you want to get deep into one color and then maybe decide. But you continuously draft one color, and then when the second one appears, you make a decision. I know some people who are actually soft forcing at stages, and I think it's also the strategy will not only depend on the format, but on what competition are you playing. As I said, I was working with a pro team, and pro tour drafts are a very different animal than the arena drafts. In arena, maybe my weaving strategy works better, but if you go to the pro tour pods, you will not see late good cards. It just won't happen. So my strategy would only be good in theory. It's worth thinking about it, and that links us to the question of the week from William. How should 17 lands be used in a format where synergy and finding an open Typal lane is so important versus individual card power? Specifically using 17 lands during the draft, at least until locking onto a color or a color pair. And long story short, there's not a great way of doing that. And probably, literally the best way of doing it is watching this episode and looking at this data, or maybe having access to the slides from this episode rather than to 17 Lands itself, and looking at win rates in each color pair and finding cards that are powerful in all the lanes that you can pick, and you can stay open to multiple possibilities when you do that. I think that this is the best thing that you can do quickly when you're drafting, because of course, in the perfect world, you will have maybe some measure of synergy, and if you have enough time to analyze it, you might get there. But when you're drafting, there is just not time for that. So what you want to do is just find the win rate of the particular card in every color combination, and then decide based on that whether you should pick it or not. So it's not trivial to use 17 lands during the draft at this level of granularity. This is the unfortunate drawback, but it's a drawback that was sort of planned for the tool. 17 lands is designed to be a learning tool and not a draft helper. It's not supposed to be helping you during the draft. That's one of the reasons why 17 lands never developed an overlay. There were many discussions about it, and they were always decided against, because the idea of 17 lands is to make you better player in the long run by giving you learning tools, and not substituting your brain with some numbers from 17 lands and telling you which pick is the best at the given moment in the draft. So hopefully that's at least somewhat helpful. And if that's not enough of a helpful answer, well, then you have a whole episode and tons of cards to look through to give you some of the context that might be helpful to answer that question without using 17 lands during the draft, but maybe looking at this episode and memorizing the cards that you might find interesting as the cards that allow you to be more open in your lane during the drafts, especially in this format, because I'm going to be specifically focusing on cards that make the non-supported archetypes better, just to give you at least some idea of how you can end up in those weird color combinations. And about I should have probably shown that thing, but we talked about it. But power is definitely the king in ECL, at least according to how I perceive this format. And the most powerful cards are going to be the defining cards of every draft. And it also has something to do with commons, which are, a lot of them are just maybe, like even the best commons are just above the replacement level. There's no outstanding commons. There's no Sipsic Appraiser. There is no, I don't know. There's definitely no Writhing Chrysalis. They are all at maxing out on the B- level or something like that. Well, in some formats we had like dozens of B-level commons. It's not the case here. That's why those powerful cards are so much more valuable, because they will be forming the top 5 cards of your deck. And the more of the top cards you have, the better your deck is going to be, because the likelier you're going to draw them. So that's why it leads to those 2 strategies. 1, draft power cards and don't care about which color pair they are into, as long as you get as many power cards as possible, and then find a lane that allows you to find enough playables in order to accommodate them, because those playables, the delta between a weak playable and a strong playable is not that large in this set. Or the other, get the first pick that is super powerful and stick to it, and make sure that you have at least one of those powerful cards in your deck. Okay, so here are the methods that I'm using for this episode. I look at the game in hand win rates of cards in their color pairs. So let's say I'm looking at the 2/2 lifelinker elf. What is the win rate of that card in the green-black deck? What is the win rate of that card in green-white deck? Then I compare those win rates to the average win rate of its color pair. So if elves have 58 and Kithkins have 57, I'm going to take the game in hand win rate of the elf, deduct the 58 for Golgari, deduct 57 for Kithkin, and then I will look at the numbers. So if a card has a 58 game in hand win rate, 58% game in hand win rate in an Azorius deck, and Azorius decks have average of 56, that card has plus 2 percentage points of this win rate. The higher the number, the better card in the deck. And keep in mind that when I'm talking about the game in hand win rate, I'm only looking at the game in hand win rate in the decks of this color. I'm not going to take the elf and take the elf's win rate across all the decks and compare it to the win rate of Kithkin. I'm going to look at the win rate in Kithkin decks and then compare it to the win rate of Kithkin to see if it improves. Okay, the interpretation of those results. Well, it's not perfectly exact science, but over time, I've done this episode a couple of times for different sets. Over time, I have learned that you have to have a sort of dynamic appreciation for those numbers. And the interpretation of how good is the card will sort of depend on the color pair's win rate. The higher the generic win rate of the color pair, the less picky I am. The lower the win rate of the color pair, the more picky I become. Because if the average win rate of the deck is 58% and my card is exact 0, it has the same win rate as the deck, I'm happy to play it. Because I'm going to have a decent deck at 58% average win rate for, average 17 lands user. I'm a bit above that average in terms of my win rate, so I would be expecting that my win rate with that card will be like 63% or something, and I'm happy with that win rate. But if I have a color combination that has an average win rate of 50 on Arena, and I have a card that is a 0, I'm drafting a 50% win rate deck, which even with my win rate is going to be, 55, 56. I'm not super happy to have that kind of a win rate in my deck. So for the low win rate archetypes, I'm looking for numbers that are way above 0. For archetypes that are the top archetypes of the format, maybe top 3 or top 4, I'm looking at cards that even -1 is fine with me. Because if my weakest card is 1% below the average win rate for the format, I'm super happy that this is my weakest card in the deck, because the top end is going to be 7, 8 percentage points higher, which means that composite win rate of the cards in my deck is going to be way above 0. And that means that my deck is expected to be a very solid deck within this archetype. Yeah, so as I said, with Elves, I'll be happy playing a card with -1 percentage point impact. It would be a solid playable in that deck. I still want my top end in those decks to be way above 0, because that's what I'm looking for in this format. I'm looking for powerful cards, 5, 6, 7 percentage points above the win rate. These are the ones that I really want to get. These are the cards I'm going to take the extra effort of getting in the draft, even if I'm not in the color. So if my first pick is Eclipsed Elf, which has probably like +8 percentage points in the Elves, and my second pick is Eclipsed or whatever, the Merfolk Lord, which is probably also around +8. I'm super happy because these are 2 cards that are going to form my top end, whether I'm in Elves or in Merfolk. And I'd rather pick this +8 Merfolk than a +1 or 0 percentage Elf card, because I can probably get enough of those 0% elf cards or -1s, and it's not such a big problem if I take a -1 instead of a somewhere later. So this is the philosophy of that. But if I'm playing Orzhov, I want all my cards to be +4, +5, because Orzhov has already a low win rate naturally in 17 lands data. Yeah, so Orzhov has a low average win rate, so I want my cards to be above 0, because that way I'm drafting a white-black deck that can be competitive with an average or even above average elf deck. So I'm definitely not going to be happy playing a -1 percentage point card in my Orzhov deck. I will probably have to do it because most commons will be in that range, but I'd rather have those exceptional cards. And we're going to focus on finding those that can sort of help you to get a better grasp on how to draft those off-color color combinations. Right, and this is what the presentation is going to look like. So what we have here is card name. We have the base win rate for each color so that you don't need to memorize them by heart, like Azorius with 55.7, and then Orzhov 50, and then there are the Elves at 56.6. And here we have Evolving Wilds in Izzet at exact 0, which means that the win rate of Evolving Wilds in the Izzet decks is exactly 55.3, because 55.3 minus 55.3 is 0. And then we have in Dimir, Evolving Wild has plus 2.5, because it has a win rate of, now I have to do the math in my head, 50.3, 50.2, 52.2, because 52.2 minus 49.7 is 2.5. So that's how we get to those numbers. And what you can clearly see is that, first of all, Evolving Wilds is relatively at 0 level for the main color combinations. In Golgari, in Rakdos, in Izzet, and in Merfolk's, and it's actually not doing that great in Kithkin, which makes me think the more you are reliant on 1-drops, the less you want to be playing Evolving Wilds. And Evolving Wilds being at minus 1.8 in Kithkin means that this card is not like particularly important for the Kithkin decks. But in the other decks, it's perfectly serviceable. And in those non-supported color pairs, it's even slightly better, like +1, +2 percentage points in those color combinations, which makes me think that in those color combinations, you either want to splash or their win rate is so low that Evolving Wilds is actively a good card in them. Still nothing impressive, but it's a land. And a land that has sort of 0 percentage points improvement is solid enough. And if there's a plus improvement, that's great because it's only a land. And then second land we have is the Eclipsed realm. That's mainly played in those Typal decks. I think only in Typal decks it has the numbers. And for weird reasons, it's fine in Kithkin, in Elementals, and in Elves. But it's not doing so well in Merfolk and in Goblins. I think in Goblins it's explainable by the fact that Goblin decks will not be loaded by Goblins because there's not enough good Goblins to put in your deck to load them with. And Merfolk, maybe also there is a lot of spells that require double pips. I don't know, the draw spell or the uncommon put something on top of the library spell that requires colored mana. That is not a Merfolk. And therefore, there's maybe a smaller utility of those lands in the Merfolk decks. But lands are not that important. And here we have also the rare shock lands. They are generally below 0 in all cases. And here there is another thing that is important to understand in the draft. That clearly Temple Garden is a powerful card in Kithkin. If I could get it pick 8, I would have loved it. But I can't because it's a rare and people will rare draft it because it's also a constructed playable card. And because of that, I need to dedicate an early pick to pick that Temple Garden. An early pick where I'm almost guaranteed to have a better card for my deck than Temple Garden is. And because of that, you pay the premium for the rares that are just solid playables, like the Shocklands will be in Limited. So you can't just draft them and expect that they're going to do the miracles, because they are not that much better than a basic land, and sometimes maybe even worse. And you have to dedicate high picks. So the picks were that, in Kithkin deck, maybe I can pick the Signpost or a solid uncommon creature at the same pick that I will have to pick Temple Garden in order to reliably take it. And that's why they have slightly minus win rate. So Shocklands are fine if you can pick them from packs where they don't collide with any playables. But as soon as you have a decent playable in the pack, you probably should prioritize a decent playable over a Shockland, because the price of having a Shockland in your deck is not worth enough. Okay, then we have the colorless commons and uncommons. And let's start with the Changing Wayfinder. And as with Evolving Wilds, it has a very good numbers in the unsupported decks. In the white-black, white-red, blue-black, blue-green. Not in Gruul for some reason. Gruul wants to play Gruul things and not Splash for some reason. Maybe wants bigger creatures, and that's why the number is minus. But for the other unsupported color pairs, it's between 2 and 4 percentage points improvement, which makes it a card already that I'm sort of interested in. Because when you think about it, if my average white-black deck has 50% win rate, but a Changing Wayfinder in my hand has 54, it says +4 in Orzhov decks, well, it's not exactly at the same level as Elves or as Merfolk, but it's not far off if I have that card in my deck, if I draw it. It's close to getting there, which means this is exactly the card I'm looking for in my white-black decks. In the regular color combinations, Wayfinder has best numbers in Elementals. It has plus 0.5 percentage points, which means I'm super happy to play it in my Elementals. It's an Elemental. It has an ETB, which I can sometimes double within my Elementals. It has this menial body that wherever you throw away to gain some life, but maybe it will stop attacking by some Kithkin or something. So fine card in there. In the others, it has around -2, which is slightly below what I'm happy to draft. I will put it in my deck sometimes, but I won't be like thrilled. Next we have the Foraging Wickermo, the 2 mana 1/3 enters Surveil, and for 1 mana you can filter and change the color of Foraging Wickermo. Again, it has decent numbers in the non-supported color pairs. This time including Gruul when it's plus 0.5. But plus 0.5 is not something that excites me in Gruul, because Gruul's average win rate is 52. So even with the bonus from the Wickermo, it's still going to be 52 and 0.7. But in Simic, it has plus 3.6. Simic is a weird one also, because a lot of Simic decks will end up 3 colors, and maybe Simic is a failure of drafting a proper multicolor deck. But it has plus 5.7 in Orzhov, which is something I'm happy to draft then actively in my Orzhov decks, potentially because there is some synergies with big toughness creatures, because maybe there is some mild vivid theme going on. All those things add up, and plus 5.7 is interesting to me. In other color combinations, the supported ones, it does fine in Izzet and in Merfolk at 0 and minus 0.6. And I assume, of course, it's not being played in every Izzet deck. You need to find the good one, the one with some amount of vivid payoffs. And in Merfolk, it can be a very interesting thing to use for Convoke, because you can change its color and convoke spells by tapping it. You can pay for the mana of the color. Like, even if you draw four planes, you can use Foraging Wickermo to generate blue mana and tap it for blue mana to cast the 5 mana blue 3 card draw spell, which is something interesting. Okay, and the next card I'm going to talk is Rooftop Percher. And I think that Secret of the Percher is out. And the secret of the Percher is, it's fine. It's a fine card in most of the decks. It's, let me look. Merfolk is the one where it struggles a bit at -2. But in Kithkin, it's at 0.1 plus. In Goblins, minus 0.1. In Elves, plus 0.1. Like, perfectly serviceable card at the average level. Which means it's not going to be your 23rd card. It's going to be your 15th, maybe 17th card in the deck. Which is absolutely fine. 5 mana for a 3/3 flyer with some Typal synergies, with ETB, which is good for elementals. Maybe that's the reason why an elemental is actually +1, which makes it a solid playable, like 12 card in your best card in your deck. I'm quite happy to pick it. I'm actively looking for it in best of 3. I definitely want to have at least one copy to play against some pesky elf brews that fill their graveyard with things and want to get certain value from that. On the other hand, it's not a card that is particularly good in those off-color combinations. It's like plus 0.8 in Orzhov, which is not something I'm super thrilled with. Minus 0.5 in Boros, which is bad because Boros has 51% win rate on average. So I'm not happy to play. I want something to be +3, +5 to put it in my Boros deck. And similar in Gruul, where it's -3, where it is actually doing fine. It's Dimir, where it's +3.5, and I don't know exactly why. Maybe that it helps you to get the correct number of flyers in your deck. Okay, and then a lot of those commons are just bad. Stalactite Dagger has -2 across board, even goes down to -4.6 in Elves. This is not the same as the equipment from Duskmourn that generated the little enchantment, the Glimmer, that generated the Glimmer. And that card was pretty decent. This one generates 2 bodies, but it's not good enough. The fact that the 1/1 is a changeling, and the fact that you can equip something to make it a changeling looks neat, but it doesn't really make the deck fantastic. Then we have Feardok Core, which is even worse, -4, -5, pretty bad card. It has +2 in Simic, may be a testament to the fact that Simic is looking to be a multicolor deck. It doesn't have any kind of natural synergy. Even the Signpost Hybrid Uncommon for Simic is something that really wants to have more colors than just Simic. At Uncommon, we have much stronger cards, and definitely Gathering Stone is one of them. Only has the win rates from the supported color pairs, but we're talking about, at worst, -1.5, at best, +6 in Goblins, which is great. It makes Goblins competitive with the other Typal decks, because Goblins are lagging behind all the other Typal decks. But in Elementals, which is already a solid deck, it has +5.4. Weirdly, Elementals are not usually that heavy on Elementals, but Gathering Stone gives you card selection that you so much need later in the game, because you really want to be drawing Gus later, because you are almost assuredly have fallen behind in life totals until you reach the mid game. So you really want to make sure that you're drawing only gas, and opponent is drawing what they're drawing. But yeah, Gathering Stone is good in any Typal deck, really. So that's why you can pick it early, because independently where you end up, Gathering Stone is going to be good. This is a very good, and I'm going to use the Lords of Limited terminology here, delayed decision kind of card. Puka's Eye, I don't know how to pronounce that word, actually. This card has a small sample size in Gruul, in Izzet, and in Simic, and actually has good numbers. It's 0 in Izzet, and I'm assuming it's a special version of Izzet that looks for those vivid synergies. +6 in Simic, which makes Simic competitive. And I guess the Simic Vivid deck is a thing. This number shows us at least. And +2 in Gruul, which is also solid. So it's a fine card if you want to have vivid synergies, one of the probably better things to be putting in your deck. Maybe together with the Foraging Wickham. And then the funny one, Dawn Blessed Pennant. It has minus everywhere, except for Elves, where it has +0.7. And I'm pretty sure that this is exclusively because it's good with the Tristan's command, the Elf 6-mana command, that you can get back with the Dawn Blessed Pennant and loop it infinitely, and as long as you can spend 9 mana a turn and do some horrendous things to your opponents. I've been on the receiving end of the Pennant plus command loop, and it was not fun for me. But my opponent, I'm sure, enjoyed immensely as they got out of a really bad situation based on that combo and won the game in the veg. Okay, and lastly we have Springleaf Drum, which doesn't have numbers anywhere except for Merfolk, when you would think it might be good because it allows you to tap a creature and there's lots of things that give you some small bonuses when you tap them. Minus 2.7, which makes me think Springleaf Drum, maybe one in 20 Merfolk decks is going to be happy playing it, but definitely not a staple in even Merfolk decks, and that makes me think everywhere else is just bad. Okay, colorless rares and mythics, only one has numbers, and it's the Chronicle of Victory. But what numbers it has? I mean, I literally started this stream today after a coaching session when we drafted the deck that had a Chronicle of Victory, and I can tell you, it carried us to victory more than once. +6, +8, +8, +7, +8. These are the numbers of that card in the supported archetypes. I mean, this is a clear first pick. There's no really thinking about it. You pick it and then you try to find the best tribal lane that you can find, because this card wins games in no time. You cannot be attacked ever again. Like, we were playing goblins and with 2 Boggart Mischiefs, and the sad thing was that once we dropped Chronicle of Victory, none of our goblins ever died. How are we going to get those pink triggers from our Mischief if Chronicle of Victory is stopping them from dying, making them basically immortal? Good problem to have, though. So the card is a Stone Cold Bomb. And all the other colorless card in the format just doesn't have a sample size, because it's Mirror Mind Crown, which looks like a clear F, and then a bunch of things on the bonus sheet with just small sample sizes and also are unplayable. So, don't worry about those. All right. So these were the colorless cards, which, of course, by the merit of being colorless, have a wide range of decks they can be in. That's why those tables for the colorless cards are much wider than what we're going to see from now on. From now on, we're going to see white commons, green commons, blue uncommons. And of course, these only go into 4 color pairs. So we're going to see only 4. 2 of them supported. And in this case, Azorius and Selesnya. And 2 that are not supported. So these are ordered by the average of those plus numbers, which doesn't necessarily mean what average game and hand win rate of the card is, because as you can see, Timid Shieldbearer has a higher win rate than Spiral into Solitude, but Spiral into Solitude has higher average of those 4 numbers. That's why it's interesting. I'm going to try to draw your attention to cards that are good, but maybe they have a high number because they are specific for one color pair and are very good in that one specific color pair. All right. So first of all, Liminal Hold is great because it has plus numbers in the supported color pairs, which means it's going to be one of your solid playables in that color pair. Not on par with the best uncommons, but something that you're actively happy to draft. But it also has very high numbers in Orzhov and in Boros, +6 and +3.5, which is a lot. So it's a card that if I draft it, I know I can put it in any of my white Typal deck, but I also know that this is one of the cards that can support this, can support my deck, even if I end up in one of those non-supported color pairs. Then Spiral into Solitude, the pacifism. And this is worse on every aspect than Liminal Hold. It looks similar in terms of numbers, but everything is like -2 percentage points. So it's below 0 in white, blue, and white, green, which makes it a playable, a thing that I'm not unhappy to have in my deck, definitely. -0.9, -0.4. +1 in white, red, which doesn't make me particularly chirpy, because I want Boros with 51.6% win rate. I want cards that have, +2, +3 to put in my deck. And +3.7 in Orzhov, which is solid for Orzhov. So Spiral and Solitude, okay, but not great. And then there's a drop-off. Like the rest of the commons are just not that amazing. Timid Shieldbearer is fine in Merfolk, and actually better numbers in Merfolk than in Kithkin, despite being a Kithkin. That's the 2-mana 2/2 that can pump the whole team for 5 mana. But, the difference between Kithkin deck and Merfolk deck is minimal, so it's roughly a good card in all of those decks. That's probably one of the better white commons, and maybe you should start picking it as such. Because the generic game and hand win rate is also 55, just 0.6 percentage points lower than than the win rate of Liminal Hold. And I don't think that Liminal Hold and Timid Shieldbearer are picked at the same kind of gravity. And Wonderbrine Preacher, the other 2-drop at common. This one is also better in Merfolk, and it is a Merfolk, so maybe that's why. And it actually has a low number in Kithkin, which makes me think that in Kithkin, you really want to have Kithkin, but in Merfolk, you really want to be able to pump your team because you're going to generate wide boards of very small creatures. So anything that can boost power and toughness for the whole team is going to behave quite okay in those decks. And then it has not convincing numbers in the non-supported color pairs, so I guess it's mainly Merfolk card. Sun-Dappled Celebrant. Bad numbers apart from Boros, where it has +2, which makes it sort of edge playable, you can put it. Makes me think that Boros wants to play large creatures and remove the rest, and then win with the one of big chunker. Then we have Gallant Foul Knight. It's acceptable in Kithkin, but nothing phenomenal, -0.8. This is the Kithkin Chicken Knight that gives +1/+0 to creatures, and Kithkin also gets first strike until end of turn when it enters. Solid card, nothing special. Definitely not a Merfolk card. Definitely put it in Kithkin. That's more or less it. Keep out the 2 mana, deal 4 to target top creature or destroy target enchantment. It has +2 in Orzhov. And that's probably borderline what I want to have in my Orzhov deck. That shows me that Orzhov really wants to play this kind of attrition control where you kill things and then you will accrue value by using the -1/-1 counter and removing them from things that you can have in the Orzhov color combination. And then that's more or less it. There's no other cards that I'm super happy to play in my decks. Maybe with one exception. Gold Meadow Nomad has poor numbers in the supported archetypes and very meh numbers in the non-supported ones. Shore Lurker, not even that great in Merfolk. That's the 3/3 flying Merfolk. Reluctant Downguard, that doesn't even I don't even register that card on my slides. I deleted that slide because the card is looking so poor. And one maybe exception here is Tributary Vulture, which doesn't even have a win rate in the non-supported color pairs because it's a Merfolk payoff. But in Merfolk deck, it's actually at -0.2, which is something I'm happy with playing. So this is a strictly Merfolk card, should not be played anywhere else. And Riverguard Reflexes and Appeal to Erdu, 2 combat tricks in white at common. Very poor numbers. And this is... It's okay, so isn't the information especially useful if the numbers are poor? To which card are we referring? The Reflexes? Yeah, it's useful. Don't put those cards in your deck. That's more or less the amount of advice I can give for those cards. Tributary Vorter is genuinely decent in Merfolk. Oh, I by accident I deleted those slides just to have fewer slides to scroll through. All the cards are going to be appearing in the rest of the presentation, and you still get numbers of those on those cards, so that's fine in that aspect. Okay, uncommons in white, and here we have. You can see on the slides that there was very little red in the commons, and you have quite a lot of red in uncommons. And of course, red in my language is good because I use the heat scale. Red, hot. Blue, cold. Best common in terms of how it performs across all the decks is Pyrrhic Strike. It has at minimum +3, at best +6. So it's a kind of card that gets better in those unsupported archetypes. This is the kind of a card I want to draft in order to have a possible entry toward those weaker archetypes. Then second one, Pyrrhic Strike, of course, the removal spell kills something with mana value 3 or greater, or destroys artifact or enchantment, or if you blight 2, you can do both. Then we have Wonderbrine Trapper, and this is the 1 mana 2/1 that can tap something by paying 1, tapping it, and tapping another untapped creature control. Obviously good in Merfolk because you can tap something for a payoff, but it also has good numbers in Kithkin. plus 4.3 in Merfolk, plus 3.5 in Kithkin. That's great. And it also has good numbers in those unsupported color pairs, which means I'm happy to play it in any white deck. Same with Protective Response, the 3 mana Convoke removal that can destroy target attacking or blocking creature. Great card, solid win rate, and I'm happy to play it in any deck. It has plus 2 to plus 5% improvement. And then we go to cards that are not great everywhere. And the first one is Thoughtweft Imbuer. It has plus 4 percentage points in Kithkin decks because it's a Kithkin payoff, you know. Whenever a creature you control attacks alone, it gets plus X until end of turn, where X is the number of Kithkin you control. Obviously, it's going to be good in Kithkin. But in White-Red, it's plus 0.5, which means that White-Red doesn't want to play a Kithkin game. However, in Orzhov, plus 7.7, which makes me think that there is some kind of a heavy white Kithkin Orzhov deck where the 0.5 is great. Because you play a lot of removal, a lot of attrition cards, and then that Thoughtweft Imbuer will let you attack through whatever is left, whatever you let live. And plus 7 is definitely a card that I'm interested in playing in Orzhov decks. It would be good to maybe look at specific builds of Orzhov decks where the Imbuer was particularly good. But in Merfolk, it's minus 0.2, which is not unplayable by all means. It's just average. And I assume that means that sometimes it's fine to play that card in Merfolk decks if the build is right. But it's not something you should prioritize either. Then we have like a card like Moonlit Lamenter, 3 mana, Treefolk, 2/5, enters with a -1/-1 counter, and you can remove a counter from it to draw a card and activate it only as a sorcery. Card is solid in those unsupported color pairs. +5, +4, this is exactly what I'm looking for. And it's still serviceable in the supported ones at exactly 0 in both of them, which is fine. And I'm pretty sure that the card is played more often in the unsupported ones than in the supported ones, which might impact its generic win rate at only 55. But it's a fine card to pick up late when there's nothing better, because you know that you can be happy to play it in your supported color pairs and actually make your unsupported ones competitive. Then Klaken Festival. Good in Kithkin, as it's a Kithkin Kindred enchantment. That's maybe a good news for the card. Plus 2.4, which makes it one of the better cards in the Kithkin decks. 0.6 on the plus in Merfolk, which is fine and solid, but nothing to be super excited about. And then it's also fine in White-Black and White-Red, +4, +2. Encumbered Regiray. This card is great in Merfolk, because it's a Merfolk. Turns out that they managed to do those cards that align with the archetypes quite well. I wouldn't have want to play it in Boros decks most of the time, only plus 0.2, but again, we're talking about the low win rate archetypes, so my standards are higher, but fine in White-Black, because it's a 2-drop that can grow bigger, it has -1/- counters, you're going to be blighting probably in White-Black deck to some extent, and having something that can remove counters from itself is good, so plus 5% for Regiray in White-Black, which again is one of those cards that make me want to draft White-Black. So if you look at that column, all those red cards in White-Black column are the cards that I'm happy to pick because I can put them in either Kithkin or Merfolk, but also these are the kind of cards that open me to draft White-Black deck without being embarrassed by its performance, because they are all actively making it almost as good as a regular supported color pair. And same, we can go with the commons, with Liminal Hold, Spiral into Solitude, and Keep Out are the 3 commons that, maybe even the Timid Shieldbearer, are the 3 commons that also going to help me draft an Orzhov deck. So these are the cards I want to watch. And there is one more in the uncommon level, which we'll get to. Then we have Kinsbale Aspirant. That's the white for 2/1 Kithkin Citizen, and you can behold a Kithkin or pay 2 when you cast it. You'd rather behold a Kithkin, because paying 3 mana for a 2/1 is not great. Paying 1 for a 2/1, excellent. Whenever a creature you control enters, this creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So it usually on turn 2 can attack as a 3/2. And sometimes you will, I don't know, cast Klaken Festival or double spell with creatures, and it will become a 4/3. And that's a good deal. A super important card for the early game for the Kithkin decks. But in Merfolk, it has -3.5, which makes it, I'm absolutely not happy playing that card. in vast majority of the non-Kithkin decks. Actually, it doesn't have enough sample size to have numbers in Orzhov, so maybe it's fine because Imbuer is fine, but not enough people have tested it. Then we have Flock Imposter, which is something I'm not happy to play in the unsupported color pairs, where it has -2 to +1 kind of range of numbers, but it's -0.1 to +0.4 in the supported ones, in Kithkin and Merfolk. And this makes it a perfectly serviceable playable in those color combinations. So kudos to the Flock Imposter. Same with Personify, slightly better numbers in Kithkin, because there putting 2 creatures at instant speed is basically a combat trick if you have the signpost. Plus 0.8 there, the absolutely fine card to be putting in your decks. I wouldn't, exaggerate with putting multiple copies, but it's probably better than any combat trick in the format, in this color pair. So yeah, well done. Minus 0.1 in Merfolk, which is same as Flock Imposter. It's fine card to put in, you don't need to prioritize it heavily. And plus 0.8 to minus 2.3 in the unsupported color pairs, which makes me not want to play those. Then we have Burdened Stoneback, the friend of the Moonlit Lamenter. Another thing that comes with -1/-1 counters, and you can remove them later. This one is a 4/4 for 2 mana, but it comes with 2 -1/-1 counters, and for 2 mana you can remove a counter from it and give something indestructible until end of turn. And it has solid numbers in white-black, which means I'm happy to play it in white-black, and also makes me think white-black really wants to have Blight synergies and ability to remove those -1/-1 counters. And the rest of the uncommons, not great, really. Everstrike's Gift has okay numbers in Kithkin. That's the aura that gives +1/+0 flying and can be cast from your graveyard. Minus 0.6 in Kithkin. Meander's Guide, the 3/2 Merfolk that you can tap another Merfolk you control when it attacks. And then if you do, you can return a creature from your graveyard to the battlefield if its mana value is 3 or less. Minus 0.8 in Merfolk, but nothing impressive. And then we have Kithkeeper. Bad numbers in white decks, but I'm not surprised. I probably want to play that card exactly when this is the only white card in my deck, because then I get the full vivid value. And 2 cards that are just having bad numbers, Crypt Swap and Bark of Doran. They have bad generic win rate and bad win rate in every archetype. And I'm pretty sure that there are some decks where Bark of Doran can be fine, but maybe it's more cute than good in that particular case. Okay, rares. Well, we start with Kin Binding, and that card is it's just wrong. Plus 11, plus 12, plus 9 at minimum. 64% generic game in hand win rate. It's just a bomb, you just pick it. Same for Curious Colossus, the mythic 7 mana 7/7. When it enters, all creatures your opponent controls becomes a 1/1 generic coward, plus whatever types it had before. This card just wins games. I had a deck that was not super special, but it had Curious Colossus, and I just went 7-0 with that, no problem. And it was a Boros deck even, so I didn't even go for any synergies or whatnot. Just drop a 7/7, turn everything else into vanilla 1/1s. Happy times. And another bomb in Erdu, Carrier of Dawn. Really solid numbers in every single color combination that has numbers on it. Same with Slumbering Walker, the 5 mana 4/7 that comes with counters on it, and you can remove counters from it to return something from your graveyard to the battlefield with power 2 or less. Very solid card. Then we go Ajani, which has small sample sizes in the unsupported archetypes because it's a mythic, so not many were opened in general. But it has very good numbers in both Kithkins and in Merfolk. You're happy to play that card. Same with Brigid. If you wondered if you really need to play Brigid in the white-green deck, no. It has +3 in Merfolk, which is good enough in my book, but +7 in Kithkin, so obviously it's better there. Kinskar Sentry, also same situation as Brigid. It looks like a Kithkin card, but it's also perfectly fine in Merfolk, where it has +3. And last, Adept Watershaper, a Merfolk Cleric, but also good in Kithkin. Both decks, it's around 3.5 plus, which is a very good playable in my deck. What else do we have? Morning Tide's Light. It's a weird card. It's a mythic. Exile any number of target creatures at the beginning of next end step. Return those cards to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. Until end of your next turn, prevent all damage that would be dealt to you. So basically you cast it as a falter effect. You remove all the blockers, and then you can attack with everything you have. You don't care because you can't lose. You can be damaged next turn. So you're quite safe from this swing back. And of course, sometimes you can exile some of your things for them to come back and accrue you some ETB effects. And bad numbers in Merfolk, strong numbers in Kithkin. And I think that has to do with the fact that Merfolk, they want to anyway attack with an evasive threat most of the time. And you don't need to blink all your opponent's creatures to push the damage with an evasive threat. You can do it via evasion. But in Kithkin, which actually stumbles sometimes because it plays like a wide board of 1/1s and 2/2s, and then the opponent has 2 3/3s on board, what do? Do you trade 2 creatures for 2/3 damage every turn? I don't think so. So having a way of clearing all the blockers is pretty important for those decks, and then +2 for Morningtide's Light is actively a good card in Kithkin. And then that's the end of white rares that are really I'm happy to play, apart from one, maybe 2. So Risk the Evermore, -2, -1.5 in the main color pairs, +1 in the unsupported one, which is not good enough in my book for those. Winnowing, -2 for Kithkin, but only -0.5 for the Merfolk. So maybe there is something in there for that card, something to be said. And Champion of the Klakan, that's the Kithkin champion, 4/5 flash and is a Kithkin Lord. +1.5 in white-green, so in Kithkins, and -7.6 in Merfolk. You just shouldn't try to make it happen. It's not happening. Also, you're getting almost assuredly a generic 4/5 creature with flash, which is fine, but nothing to write home about, given the fact that you must arrest one of your cards in order to cast it. So yeah, don't play it in Merfolk. Just stick to Kithkin when it's actually good. And Idyllic Tutor and Kinsbale Cavalier, just not big sample size enough, because they are the bonus sheet cards. Okay, let's look at the blue commons. And again, we see the same issue as we have seen before. Nothing really outstanding. And there are a couple of solid commons. Temporal Cleansing is one. It has +0.6 in Merfolk and +1.8 in the Elementals, which is fine. But nothing really that impressive in the unsupported color pairs in blue-black and blue-green, which makes me think it's very hard to make those decks work. But yeah, Temporal Cleansing, fine to great in Elementals. I guess in Elementals, it's a 4-mana spell that you can cast without spending a single mana on it if pushed to do it. So it can give you some payoffs for casting those 4-mana spells as well. And Unexpected Assistance, the 5-mana draw 3 card that also has Convoke, another 5-mana spell, 4-mana plus spell that you can cast without tapping any mana. So that's great for those. This one has +1 in Merfolk and +0.5 in Izzet Elementals. And in blue-black, it's fine, +1.8. But blue-black has such a poor win rate that I would like something to have at least +5 to play Dimir as a pure deck. Which makes me think that, just judging by the fact that no commons really pass my bar for being good in Dimir, that deck is not really viable. Then we have the last solid blue common. It's Blossom Bind, 0 in Merfolk, +0.6 in Izzet. It's just fine. You put it in your deck and you're okay with that. And then that's more or less it. There's a couple of cards that maybe are fine in one of the decks. It's not Wild Unraveling, although it's worth noting it has +2.7 in Dimir, so it sort of is at least approaching a card that I can consider picking someone. But you can get those super late. But from that, I want to maybe note that Dimir actively maybe wants to have Wild Unraveling. So yeah. Then we have Stratosaurer, which is poor in Merfolk, -2.9. And, not good enough in the unsupported color pairs, but in Elementals, it actually is +1.1, which is fine. It's better numbers than Blossom Bind. So maybe you want that 17th and a half land in your deck that sometimes will become a 3/5 creature that can block a lot. Then we have Glamour Might, which is also not amazing. Some promising numbers in Dimir, but again, that's the deck that probably will come together once every 50 drafts or so. But -1 in Merfolk, -2.4 in Elementals, it's not really something that you're interested in. Gravelgill Scoundrel is fine in Merfolk, plus 0.5. That's fine. You want to put it in your deck actively. But -1.8 in Izzet, so you don't want to play it in Izzet. And mediocre numbers in Dimir, so not great there. It's a strictly Merfolk card. And same can be said for the Silvergill Peddler. Maybe at a stretch as a filler in the Elemental deck, but not more than that. And then we have Summit Sentinel, the 1/3 Elemental 2-drop, the 1/3 that dies into drawing a card, 0 in Elementals, which is fine. I can put it in there. And Kulrath Mystic, similar numbers to the numbers of Summit Sentinel. That's the 3-mana 2/4 Elemental that gets +2/+0 in Vigilance until end of turn when you cast a spell with mana value 4 or greater. -0.2, fine, put it in your Elementals decks. And Aquitech Defenses, Runaway Together, Wonderwine Destructor, just horrendous numbers across the board. Just ignore those cards if you can. But that is not a very long bench of those filler commons in blue. I think that biggest problem of blue is the common quality just doesn't make it. Uncommon level though, here we can start talking. And we start with the Rhymekin Recluse. 60% win rate. That's a rare level win rate for that card. It's a rare level card and you should be picking it as a rare level card. Moreover, it is great in the supported archetypes, +5.4, +5.8 in Merfolk and Izzet. And it's also great in those unsupported ones. So +6.6 in Dimir and +7.8 in Simic. Which means this is the kind of a card that if you really need to pivot into Dimir for some reason, you want to have some copies of that. That's the kind of that you're interested. Another one that is generically good, Shine Striker, 58.6 game in hand win rate, which is solid. And +2.6 in Merfolk, +4.6 in Elementals. Which is, again, almost Recluse level at an uncommon. So definitely a card you can put in any blue deck that is supported, and it also has great numbers in both Simic and Dimir, so you want to play that card in any deck that has blue and can cast it reliably. Managed to cast it turn 3 in one of my games. That was a good feeling. Then we have Unwelcome Sprite. And here we have a card that actually is fine in Dimir Fairies, +4.3. So this is the kind of a card that lets you play the fairy synergies, because it's not because it is a fairy itself, because you don't get much value for that most of the time, but the fact that you get a payoff for casting spells during opponent's turn, which aligns best with the Dimir hybrid uncommon fairy, that's probably what pushes it across the border. And it's also fine in blue-green, but +6, which means that this makes my Dimir, my Simic decks as good as a generic elemental deck or something like that. And it's still +1 and +2 in Merfolk and Elementals, so a fine card. Omni Changeling, another card that is fine everywhere, particularly in Simic where it is +7, which is impressive. And to some extent playable in the other ones where it is like +1, +1.5. So maybe not great in the mirror, but good enough in the supported color press to be happy to draft it. Next uncommon, Silvergill Mentor. That's the Merfolk Mentor, 2/1 that enters with a 1/1 and costs 2 if you have Merfolk to behold. +5 in Merfolk decks, and still +1.5 in the Izzet decks, which means that if you have enough Changeling and Merfolk in your Izzet deck, you're happy to play it. But again, people only put it probably when it makes sense into their decks, which means that these numbers are skewed. It doesn't mean that a generic Izzet deck will want Silvergill Mentor, but that there are Izzet decks that want Silvergill Mentor, and you should know when you stumble upon those. Next card, Glamour Gifter. Another card that has solid numbers across board. Plus 2.5 in Merfolk, plus 1.7 in Elementals, and plus 2.5, plus 3 in the unsupported color pairs, which is fine. Again, card that you're happy to play in any blue deck, even the unsupported ones. And then we have more of the cards that are not uniquely great in all the decks. Tanufel Rhyme Speaker is great in Izzet, because it is plus 2.6 there. And it's fine in blue, black, and blue, green, because it's 2.7 in there. Higher number than in Izzet, but of course the win rate of those is very low, which means I'm way happier to play it in Izzet, where it improves my 55% win rate, than to play it in Dimir when it improves my 49.7 win rate by a similar amount. Next, Noggle the Mind. Not great numbers in Merfolk, minus 1.4, but solid in Izzet at plus 1.3. And good numbers in the unsupported color pairs, 3.7, 3.3. This is, again, a card that I'm mildly satisfied with picking and then pivoting into one of the unsupported color combinations. Mind you, I will only do it when I have way better reasons than Noggle the Mind. It's just knowing that I pick cards that are good in those unsupported archetypes makes it easier for me to pivot into them when I fail to find the tribal lane, or Typal lane, sorry. Swat Away, similar numbers than the Noggle the Mind. Okay in Elementals, plus 0.7. Not that okay in Merfolk at minus 1.7. And this one is not making me happy to draft one of those supported archetypes that plus 1.4, plus 1, basically. Lofty Dreams. The card is fine in the supported archetypes, plus 0.8 in Merfolk, plus 0.2 in Elementals, and probably not great in the unsupported color pairs. That's the aura with Convoke that draws a card on ETB and gives a creature +2/+2 and flying. So yeah, making bigger bodies in Merfolk, getting a 4 mana plus spell, and potentially upgrading a big creature in the Elementals deck. Apologies, I came in late to is it the highlighted percent increase above the average win rate of the card or of the color pair? Of the color pair, Bebo. Okay, then we have Thirst for Identity to draw 3, and then you can discard a creature or 2 cards. Not amazing numbers. -2, -1 in Izzet. So maybe in Izzet it's like begrudgingly playable. +3 in Dimir, which makes me okay to pick it there if I'm in that color pair. Or it allows me to pivot into that. The problem with this card is that I have to pick it for my Merfolk deck where the card is bad in order to be able to pivot into bad Dimir deck, so I'm not super happy about any of that part of the scenario. So yeah, there you go. A Rhyme Chill, 7 mana, instant, costs 1 less for each color among permanents you control, and you stun 2 creatures and draw a card. And bad numbers in Merfolk, -4.2. -0.6 in Elementals, which means it's begrudgingly playable in some versions of it. And then +1 with a bit in both the unsupported color pairs. That's not high enough for me to be excited. And Wondervine Farewell. This is a strictly Merfolk card. The 7 mana Kindred Sorcery Merfolk. Surprise, surprise, it's good in Merfolk. With Convoke. And then you can bounce 2 things, 2 non-land permanents to their owner's hand, and then if you control a Merfolk, you make a 1/1 Merfolk token for each permanent that you returned into its owner's hand that way. So most of the time you'll get 2 Merfolk, 2 1/1s for the annoyance of casting that spell. So as you can see, Rhyme Chill and Wonderwine Farewell are 2 similar cards in what they're doing. Just Rhyme Chill is better in Elementals and probably the Vivid slanted Elemental decks, and Farewell is really good in Merfolk, but nowhere outside of it. And then we have Pestered Wellguard, which is solid playable in both of the supported archetypes at -0.2, -0.4. Illusion Spinners, which is bad everywhere and shows some potential promise in fairy decks. Because, first of all, you can cast it with flash if you control a fairy, which is great. Yeah, if it's untapped, it has hexproof, which is somewhat annoying. At +3, which means you probably want to be putting it in your Dimir decks. And lastly, Spell Snare. Leave it for game 2 when you're on the draw in Constructed, and don't put it in your decks, especially not in best of 1. At a stretch, I can imagine it being fine as a sideboard card against like particularly 2-drop heavy decks. Okay, and then of course we have a gallery of rares and mythics, and there's plenty of good ones, and they're really all solid. And the ones that have the sample size for the off-color decks are not that many, which means that people don't play many Dimir decks and many Simic decks. That's general conclusion out of there. But Lockmare, great in every deck. Flittering Nuisance, fine in every deck, and maybe suffering a bit for being played a lot in Dimir decks. But the generic win rate is only 60%, which is not bad at all. But I think it could be higher if Dimir decks were excluded from the sample size. Disruptor of Currents, also very high win rate, +6, +7 across the supported archetypes. All of those cards, including Champion of the Shoal. Remember, the Champion of the Klakan, Champion of the Kithkin creature, had bad numbers in Merfolk decks, but Champion of the Shoal is fine in Elemental decks, mainly because potentially Izzet decks will play more Merfolk, and they will play some Changelings in order to get the Vivid synergies into play. So +4 percentage points in Izzet decks. And I assume that people who play those cards know exactly when they can afford to put the Champions of the Shoal. But it also suggests to me that if you pick the early Champions of the Shoal, you don't need to restrict yourself to Merfolk. You can actually pivot into Elementals if you have enough the solid Merfolk plus some Changeling action in your deck. And then we have Thunderflock, which has 0 in Merfolk, which is actually not terrible, and +11 in Elementals. That's a stone cold bomb. That's like the kin binding levels of power. So this is one of the best cards that you can get for Elemental deck, but it also means that if you draft it to maximize its power, you really want to go into Elemental decks. This is the kind of a card that wants you to put the blinders on and force Elementals, which most of the time is actually possible to be done. Sig, the Merfolk flip card, is better than Merfolk at +6.5, but it also has fine numbers in blue-red. Mainly because I think a lot of blue-red decks will be able to flip it if they really want to. +3.4 is solid. It's, the level of better uncommons. So you don't have to worry that Sig is a Azorius card in its name. 2/2 unblockable for 2 mana is still good enough. By the way, this is yet another blue 2 mana 2/2. I wonder when we're going to see the first one at common. Glen Elendra's Answer. I see this card late in drafts way too often. I think people are sleeping on it. So if you don't think that it's a good card, it is a very good card. On the face value, it's just a 1/1 Mystic Snake with flying, because you will create a fairy. And sometimes it's like a Battle Screech that also counters something for 4 mana, which is a great number. Also, people are not that afraid of counter spells in this format, so you can blow someone out of the waters with a carefully positioned Glen Elendra's Answer. Okay. Then we have Oko, Lorwyn Liege, the Planeswalker that can flip for green, and it has good numbers in blue-red, mediocre numbers in white-blue, so it's not a Merfolk card. And then +10.5 in blue-green, which makes me think This card really needs to be flipped to be good, really good. And if you don't flip it, it's not going to be amazing. Glenelender Guardian, the 3 mana 3/4 flyer, enters with a -1/- counter, and then you can pay 2 mana and remove a counter from it to counter. You can remove a counter to counter target non-creature spell, and then its controller will draw a card. So, like, because it has flash, you can cast it, surprise someone, counter their important spell, let them draw a card, but make sure that the card that you countered is way better than the average draw that player can make in their deck. And then you have left with the very, very respectable 3/4 flying body that can do some serious damage. And, solid numbers in supported archetypes, solid numbers in also in fairy decks. Mirror Form. Plus 2.3 in Merfolk, only minus 0.4 in Izzet Elementals. Turns out Mirror Form is looking like more of a Merfolk card in terms of the win rate, but it's like way below the rest of the rares we've been talking about. Harmonized Crescendo, 0 in Merfolk, minus 2 in Izzet. So yeah, you can put it in your Merfolks, but I would probably want to pick it quite late in the draft in order to be happy to pick it. And probably someone copied my Kith binding. Oh, ouch. I've seen today a screenshot of someone copying opponent's Signpost Goblin, the 2/3 Death Toucher that when a goblin dies, it pings opponent for 1. And they had a board of like 8 to 9 goblins and just attacked and killed the opponent because they couldn't even kill anything because the triggers from the ping would kill them at that stage. And then we have Rimefire Torque, Mistbind Clique, and Wonderwine Prophet, cards that don't have enough sample size even to be evaluated. However, Rimefire Torque has a generic game in hand win rate at 40, which is one of the worst cards of the year probably. That's going to be so. Yeah, you can skip picking that card. We move to black. And the commons, there are actually some solid commons in there. And here we have the ease that the first 2 color pairs are the supplementary ones. That's why we see more red there. And the second others are the supported ones. And Boxeater's Embrace is a great card. It has plus 1.4 in Elves, which is great because Elves is the strongest archetype. Plus 2.1 in Goblins. And, Goblins is one of those supported color pairs that have a win rate of the non-supported ones. So here I'm also expecting to see higher numbers. But Boxeater's Embrace, I think, crosses that bar, and I'm quite happy to have it in my deck. Blightrot is just a weaker version of Boxeater's Embrace. It performs weaker in the best archetypes, but actually stronger in the weaker archetypes. Plus 4 in Orzhov and Dimir, which is fine. In Orzhov, because you want to be playing attrition game. In Dimir, because you want to play instant speed game, which Blightrot does, and that may explain why it's better there than Boxeater's Embrace. But in the regular supported color pairs, only plus 0.5 in Goblins, which is not something I'm super happy about. And plus 1 in Elves, which is actually something I'm happy about because Elves has high generic win rate. Best black common in terms of its win rate generically. Second best. And Eulogist is going to win with that. But Scarblaze Scout, the 2 mana 2/2 lifelinker elf that mills 2 when it enters, is the best, second best black common. And it's mainly because it's really good in Elves. It's really bad in Goblins. Just don't try to play it in Goblins. The fact that it's a body with lifelink that is cheap is no longer as relevant as it was when we had Kaldheim or something. But it is a fine card to put either in Orzhov or in Dimir, where they have like around plus 4, which is, I'm fine with that. This is maybe like a secret card. Barbed Bloodletter. Equipment, when it enters, attach it to something. That creature gains Wither until end of turn, and it gets also plus 1/+2. And of course, there's Flash. In Orzhov decks, plus 6.5, which makes me think that those decks literally want to have Bloodletter in them. So maybe a card that you should take notice if you think you might end up in Orzhov adjacent lane, maybe that Bloodletter is actually something you actively want to have. As I said, best black common in terms of generic win rate is Dawnhand Eulogist. But it gets its very good win rate by being played quite a lot in Elves decks and not as much in the other ones. And in the Elves decks, it has particularly high win rate because it's plus 2.1 in Elves decks. It still has solid numbers in all the other ones. 1.9 in Orzhov, 1.5 in Dimir, and plus 0.2 in Goblins. But it's not the same, especially in Goblins, where Goblins have an average low win rate. So Eulogist, unsurprisingly, really is an Elf card, and you should only play it in Elves. And then we have a bunch of cards that are not generically good. Scarblade's Malice, Auntie's Sentence, Dream Caesar, Blighted Blackthorn, Vile Boggart, and Boggart Prankster. These cards are not that great. They last two are fine to play in Goblins, but Goblins has a low win rate. But all those cards can be actually quite decent in White-Black deck. Now, we saw a lot of cards that are going to be good in White-Black, and still White-Black doesn't have a high win rate, which means, to me at least, that people are not building their White-Black decks appropriately. They could get better, because we also, when we look at the white cards, we saw a lot of the cards that were good in White-Black. So maybe make a note of those cards if you're theory crafting what type of Orzhov deck would be good, and start speculating on those cards, because you can get them quite late, like Dream Sizers, the Blackthorns of the world, that have plus 3 percentage point improvement in White-Black. Maybe if you start putting the exactly right cards in White and Black, you can make it a more viable deck than the average win rate would suggest in this set. And to close off, we have Bile. Alex was right, it's a hard card to pronounce in stream. The Vile Boggart, the rural juror of Lorwyn Eclipsed. Plus 0.7 in White-Black, that's not impressive. I want something higher than that number. But minus 0.1 in Goblins, maybe acceptable at a push. And same goes for Boggart Prankster, plus 1.2 in Orzhov and 0 in Rakdos. And then we have two cards that are just bad. Moonglove Extractor, even in Elves, it's at minus 3.2. So, a bad Elf for the Elf deck. The body is not relevant. It just loses you games against Kithkin because it can trade with the 1/1 token. You will draw a card, possibly, but not even always. Sometimes you need to block with it, and it's a horrendous blocker. So, yeah, this is a card that maybe you should deprioritize a bit. And Heirloom Auntie, you should never prioritize. Minus 10 percentage points in Black-Green. But it just shows you, if you put that card in your Black-Green deck, then something must have gone horrendously wrong. Then we have the uncommons, and we start with the uncommon that is super focused and only played at the large enough sample size in one color combination, and that color combination is Goblins. And maybe instead of going through each card here, we can look at the Goblins and we can see that realistically just two uncommons in black are something I should be attracted to in the Goblins deck. It's Boggart's Mischief and the Mud Button Curse Tosser, the 1-mana 2/1 with Behold that has plus 5, and Boggart's Mischief plus also 5, practically. So these two cards are the cards that I really, really want to have in my Goblin decks, because they make them more than competitive if I have them. But the rest of the cards are not impressive in Goblin deck, maybe with an exception of Unbury that is at plus 1.8. All of them are middling, to say the most. And Boggart Mischief is not played in other decks because obviously that's super synergistic for the Goblins on so many levels. But then we have cards that are a bit more generic. Iron Shield Elf, generically good uncommon, good in the unsupported color combinations, good to find in the supported ones, obviously better in Elves than in Goblins, but you can still play it in Goblins with some positive numbers. And then we have another card that is very similar, Nameless Inversion, almost identical numbers as Iron Shield Elf, also better in Elves than in Goblins as a card. And lastly, from the same series of cards, Creekwood Safe Ride, again, better in Elves than in Goblins, but good in all of those decks, and also fine in the unsupported color pairs. Unbury, a bit of a different story. Solid numbers in Goblins. We have to keep in mind that Goblins are not that great. But in Elves, it's only plus 0.4, which is not spectacular. You don't mind playing it, but it's not like you're going to be celebrating that you got past Unbury. Similar with the Gnarlback Elm, only this one doesn't even have the great numbers in Goblins. Plus 0.4 is not impressive for an archetype with 52.8% game and win rate. And also middling numbers for the other archetypes. So I would be wary of putting Gnarlback Elm into my deck. This is not like a busted card. Grave Shifter, again, middling numbers. Fine in Goblins, fine in Elves, but nothing to cheer. Requiting Hex. It actually has good white-black numbers. Again, strengthening my belief that white-black wants to be attrition and wants to have as much removal as it can get its paws on. Mudbound Cursorcer, we mentioned the 2-1. It also has okay numbers in Orzhov, plus 2.4, but horrendous in Elves, minus 7.3. Not something you want to be doing in your Elves deck, because if you have a good Elves deck, you won't have it reliably on turn 1. If you have a bad Elf deck, well, then you have a bad deck. Shimmer Creep, the vivid payoff, plus 3 in Dimir. So maybe that's one home where it can find some use. Gut Splitter Gang. That's the 4-mana 6/6. At the beginning of your first main phase, you may blight 2 if you don't lose 3. This card can work with some of those tree folk / giants that require you to remove counters for an effect. This is actually going to be actively good for those decks because you're having a free source of putting tokens. And if you have some abilities that remove 2 tokens, well, then we're in business. Nightmare Sower, the fairy payoff, has okay numbers in fairy, plus 2.8. But fairy has such a low bar to cross that everything could be good in that deck, I guess. And then we have a lot of menial uncommons, like nothing that excites me here. Maybe Wretched Wretch is plus 0.8 in Goblins, which is at the stretch acceptable, but no more than that, because as we remember from the beginning of the presentation, I require large numbers from the low win rate color pairs that Goblins is. And we have a bunch of cards that are just bad almost across the board. Darkness Descends, Dose of Dawnglaw, and Perfect Intimidation. These cards don't do much in this format. Don't do enough, that's for sure. And we can move to the black rares and mythics. Starting with Gloom Ripper, which turns out is good enough also in Goblin decks with plus 8. But definitely better in the Elves decks with plus 11.8. Just remember to tap 5 mana to cast it. My advice for you. Then we have Tester of Wares, which looks like a Goblin tribal payoff or Typal payoff. And it is 10% plus in Goblins, but only 3.5 in Elves. That means, though, that it's perfectly serviceable in your Elf deck. You just need a couple of Changeling, maybe one other good Goblin or something, and you got a stew going. So Taster of War is a good card, but way weaker than Gloom Ripper on a generic level. Bitter Bloom Bearer, also good numbers across board whenever there is enough data to assess it. That's the 2-mana 1/1 flying that sort of has a built-in Bitter Blossom, so makes a 1/1 fairy every turn. Dawnhunt Dissident, also a card is great in every deck that has black in it. Plus 7 in white-black, plus 4 in black-green, plus 6 in Goblins. Solid card everywhere. Grub probably is played too much outside of Goblins, and actually there are some Goblin decks where it's not going to be that amazing. Once you can assemble Grub plus the Grub's command, now we're talking probably about a much higher improvement. I can't tell it from this data because it's not granular enough, but I can make an educated guess that there are Goblin decks that are weak for that card. And then we have Bloodline bidding, the 8 mana, reanimate everything from your graveyard of the chosen creature type. Much better in Elves, because Elves fill the graveyard with Elves, which means you have things to reanimate. And also should be able to convoke it out relatively cheap. So plus 5.4 in Elves, making it the second best card for the Elf archetype in black. Losing only to Gloom Ripper, which is not a surprise really. Champion of the Weird, great numbers in Goblins, plus 7, but don't put it in Elves, minus 2.2. I mean, I guess you can find some kind of a weird deck where it just came together and you have a bunch of Goblins in your Elf deck, but don't really try to do it, and don't try to make it happen. It's not probably worth it. Moonshadow, not enough sample size to look at the non-supported archetypes, but solid numbers there, plus 3, plus 1.8, not bad for a 1-drop really. So it is, even in limited, a bomb, and imagine what can happen if you can construct for that card. Twilight Diviner, that's just a solid replacement level playable, plus 1 across board in Rakdos and Golgari, which means I'm quite happy to play it in my Golgari decks. Question is which level of the pick I need to pick it on. And then we have Moonsong Aria, which is an F, and Bitter Blossom, which is just not opened enough to have proper numbers. Okay, and we can move to the red. And we start with probably the biggest surprise of this format in terms of the common win rates. In Colorless Zealot, we've been used to common land cyclers in regular standard sets not being great. You know, the last time we had good land cyclers was Lord of the Rings set, and Colorless Zealot is a premier card. I really like it. I have multiple copies in my deck. I'm happy to play 3 copies of it because I'm sure that one of them I will use for cycling in that situation. And it has good numbers in both the Elementals deck and in even Goblins. It's plus 1, plus 5, which is not terrible. But you probably want to be playing it in the Elementals deck. However, it also has good numbers in Red-Green, plus 4, and in White-Red, plus 4, which means I'm happy to pivot into those decks when I'm drafting red and I don't see either Goblins or Elementals being open. So a solid card. This is one of the few of those common reasons to be off color a bit. Then we have Cinder Strike, which is the 1 mana shock that can upgrade to deal 4. And it's great in both Izzids and Goblins, plus 2. And it's fine in White-Red and Red-Green, but not a priority. It's not something that I will be thrilled to have in those decks. Plus 2 is maybe fine enough in Boros. Then we have Flamekin Guildweaver. And this is a card that is strictly one archetype. Plus 2.5 in Izzet, which is great. A fantastic card for that deck. Minus 1.5 in Goblins, which is, no, please avoid that card in my Goblin deck. It just doesn't work most of the time, at least. And then middling numbers in those unsupported color pairs. Plus 0.6, plus 1.6. That's not good enough to convince me. Tweeze. Solid in Izzet Elementals. And actually, this is probably what Elementals gains from. It has a good collection of commons in red that are fine for this deck. So Tweeze is plus 1.3 in Elementals and plus 0.6 in Goblins, which, given the fact that Goblins is not the strongest deck, not really something I'm super thrilled to play, but I probably will have to because I'm going to run out of the cards. But yeah, definitely for the Goblin decks, I want to be focusing on these high rarity cards. And then we have Feed the Flames. So Cinder Strike, Tweeze, Feed the Flames, all of those cards are on this plus side of the red removal spells, showing a certain amount of importance of those cards in the decks. Plus 1.2 in Izzet and plus 0.4 in Goblins. Again, Izzet is much happier to play that card than the Goblins are. And again, like the previous one, like Tweeze, not amazing numbers in those unsupported archetypes, which means it's a filler there at best. Then we have Gristle Glutton, plus 0.6 in Rakdos, but minus 1.7 in Elementals. So it's a flip from Flamekin Guildweaver. You really prefer to have that card in your Goblin deck. Of note, it has plus 1.5 in White-Red. And I think that does have something to do with that if you go for the White-Red deck, you want to be having those things with -1/-1 counters that you can remove from them, and having a way of putting those counters on them is great. Like, imagine if you have the white Tree Folk that 2 mana, you can remove a counter from it to draw a card. That means that in the turn cycle, you can rummage with the Glutton, put the counter on the Tree Folk, remove the counter from the Tree Folk, and you just rummaged and drew an extra card out of that, which is like a nice engine to get card advantage in those decks. Brumbleback Brute, bad numbers in the supported color pairs, like -1, -1.6, and fine numbers in Gruul. Plus 2.1 is maybe something that is actually spiking my interest to be put in the Gruul deck. So maybe this is the kind of a card that will, I tried to go for Elves. Green was sort of open, but black was not, and I didn't get enough Elves. Maybe I can put some red chonkers like the Colorless Zealot, like the Flamekin Guildweaver and Brumbleback Brute, and build my deck around that. Gruul, smashing. Elder Auntie, just middling numbers for that card. Not anything impressive, so just no need to play it, unfortunately. It would have been a good card in some sets, but just not very good in this particular set. Then we have Reckless Ransacking, the combat trick that gives +3/+2 and make a treasure. Not great. Plus 2.1 in White-Red, which is fine, I guess. Maybe worth trying here and there. Maybe, it can ramp you to the expensive spells that you can cast in those particular decks while making you trade with some oppressive early attacker or something. But then not an impressive card by any stretch of imagination. And the rest of the red commons are just sort of bad. And that includes Burning Curiosity, a card that maybe some people are a bit higher on. The 3 mana, exile the top 2 cards of your library, and you can cast them until end of turn. And if you buy one, you get an additional card to look at from those. Then we have Bone Club Berserker, not even amazing in the Goblin decks, -1.9. And we have Flame Chain Mauler, which actually is -0.3 in Izzet decks, which means you can put it and it's not embarrassing in there, despite being very low, but it's really bad in every other color combination. And then Enraged Flamecaster, which is technically an Izzet payoff. It's the elemental that pings opponent for 2 for every spell with mana value 4 or greater that you cast, but the body of it is just not good enough. I think that couple of swaps in the stats for certain cards would have been very beneficial. I think that Enraged Flamecaster would have been much better if it was a 2/3, because then it can block the Vigilant 2/2 flying Merfolk that is a pretty oppressive card. But as a 3/2, it can block it once, die in the process, and the reach is not doing much. It's a single-use reach rather than a multi-use reach. In terms of uncommons, well, not as great as in some other colors. I think that we saw a deeper roster of uncommons in other colors to some extent. But there are still some that are worth looking at. And Explosive Prodigy is the best of them in terms of like generically being good in every color combination. Because it's fine in the unsupported color combinations, +4, +5. That's exactly what I'm looking for in those decks. But it's also +4, +3 in the supported ones, +4 in Elementals and +3.4 in Rakdos. In Elementals, because they are more conducive to playing Vivid in general, so maybe you have like 3 colors and it can ping for 3. And also you can double the elemental triggers, and it's an elemental to find with your Eclipsed card. So like lots of small things that add up to it being a really solid card in those Izzet decks. Flamebraider, on the other hand, is not that amazing of a pivot card, because it's so much better in Izzet than anywhere else. that you probably should consider it as mainly an Izzet card. And sometimes, once in a blue moon, you will draft a different color combination deck that just has enough of those elementals in it for you to be able to play Frame Braider. Then we have Seer, which is a great card in those supported color combinations. Plus 3.5, plus 2.5, that's fine. And it's also serviceable in non-supported ones. So you're happy to pick it because, again, it's one of those flexible cards. Not as good as Explosive Prodigy. Turns out that the 1/1 body counts for as a lot, and it counts for not dealing as much damage to the creature most of the time, but having a 1/1 body coming with it is actually worth something. Then we have Boulder Dash, and that's a very similar stat line than Seer has. Also a 2-mana spell, also deals damage, but this time divided over 2 targets, and one gets 2, the other one gets 1. So, and not instant speed. Still a solid card. Plus 2 in Izzet and plus 1.3 in Goblins. And plus 3.5 in Gruul, because maybe clearing wider boards is beneficial for you when you're playing a deck that focuses on putting more sizable creatures onto the battlefield. And if you can get rid of a bunch of small ones and limit how wide the board of your opponent is, maybe that's the recipe for getting a decent Gruul deck. Sauerbread Auntie, plus 2.2 in Goblin decks, which is fine in my book, but also plus 2% in just Izzet, which is somewhat impressive, I have to say. So I'm usually maybe more happy to play Sauerbread Auntie as a generically good card and not as a strictly Goblin card. Sizzling Changeling, the 3/2 that dies into Impulse Draw. This one, fine. 0.4, 0.3 on the plus in Goblins and Izzet, and plus 1, plus 0.5 in the other 2. Kindle the Inner Flame is a one-trick pony card that mainly should be played in the elemental decks. Plus 0.4. It's not high priority. It's not an amazing card, but it's a fine card. When you have enough elementals, it will do things. Soulbright Seeker. Oh, by the way, Kindle the Inner Flame doesn't even have numbers anywhere outside of elementals. That's important to know. Soulbright Seeker, that's the Behold Elemental card. 1-drop for a 2/1 for 1. And has an ability, spend red mana, give something trample. But if you use it 3 times per turn, you also add 4 mana to your mana pool. That's how I managed to get my Shine Striker on turn 3. This into Flame Braider, into 3 mountains on turn 3, filtering the mana to make it 4, and tapping the Flame Raiders for 2 blue and casting the Shine Striker. And one thing I noticed is that a couple of my opponents had that card, and I don't know, maybe they wanted to be time efficient or something, but they did not activate it on their turn to get 4 mana for no value whatsoever, despite casting something like a draw spell. And then later they drew some cards, but they couldn't redeploy them because they didn't get the extra mana potentially. So do use that card whenever you can. It's probably worth it. Giant Fall, not great numbers. There is like a cliff between Soulbright Seeker and the rest of the uncommons here. Not that the other ones were like super amazing, but Giant Fall is actually having acceptable numbers in red-green. Plus 2.3, with the average win rate for red-green at 52.2. That's enough for me to be moderately interested. And, you'll have giants in those colors, so maybe that's the reason why it's better. But in blue-red, which also will have some larger creatures, minus 0.5, which is begrudgingly okay. The problem is that the card is an uncommon and is a removal spell, and it looks better than it is. That's why probably people pick it too early. And if you pick a good and not so good card early, you have to sacrifice good picks for it. So that might suffer your long-term win rate. And then we have a bunch of cards that are not amazing anywhere. Stink Slinger is at minus 0.7 in Goblins, but that's not enough for me to be interested. Squawk Roaster has a plus 0.2 in white-red. Again, not enough to impress me. Warren Torchmaster, just not a good card. Like at best -1 in goblins is not enough. Boldwyr Aggressor. I played with that card probably more than I should have, and it worked for me, but generic 17 lands user doesn't seem to make it work that well. It has plus 0.7 in Gruul. That's its best score. Horrendous number in the supported archetypes, obviously because probably you don't want to be playing off Typal cards in those. Minus 3.6, minus 5.4 in the elementals and goblins. But I think that this is a card that you can sometimes build a decent deck around. You just need maybe a Boros deck with a couple of giants, couple of changelings, and all of a sudden you have something that is not bad at all. And then the last three, Goat Nap, Lasting Starfire, and Impolite Entrance. Those cards look really bad. At minus 2.5 for Goat Nap in Goblins, that's not impressive because Goblins have low win rate. But the other one, Starfire, -6. And Impolite Entrance, -7, -8 for the Elementals and for the Goblins. The 1-mana cantrip at sorcery speed probably is something that is for Spellslingers decks in some sort of constructed. And I don't even know which type. Trample and Haste. That's not enough to make that card, sell that card to me. In terms of mythics and rares, well, we do have Soul Immolation, which is amazing. 62% generic win rate, but plus 8.8 in Izzet, plus 8.6 in Goblins. Now, this is the kind of a card that will put me on red in the deck. And in Gruul, plus 15. That card is better in Gruul than it is in Izzet and in Goblins. And by quite a lot. So like a super strong card for Gruul, which maybe is a suggestion of what does Gruul want to achieve in those games. And that is cast big creatures, and then if you can wrath your opponent's board and deal them a ton of damage, you're going to win those games. So that's why it's probably so good. While in Goblins, it's, Goblins are not that big in terms of their sizing. And keep in mind that, sometimes it's the creature will deal some damage maybe. But in this case, it's Soul Immolation deals X damage, which means that it won't work if you select like a creature with Death Touch to put the blight on. Then we have Spinerock Tyrant, the dragon of the set. 5 mana, 6/6 flying with Wither, and it can copy some spells. It's great. +9 in Izzet, +9 in Goblins. You want to be playing that card. And Blaze Epiphany, another card that I see maybe a bit too late sometimes. I've got it from like pretty late picks a couple of times. And that's strange because it's red and an X for deal X damage to target creature. And then if that creature dies, you exile that many cards from top of your library equal to its power. And then you can choose one card and you can play it until the end of your next turn. So card draw like Impulse with selection that kills something, great. +6 across board, maybe even +7. And a card that you should probably update your pick orders and pick it much higher than you think, because it's actually a bomb level card. Constructed All-Star Ashling Rekindled. Not enough data for Goblin decks, probably because in order for that card to be really good, you need blue mana, and Goblin decks don't really want to splash. But +7 in Elementals, which is more than good. That's a good reason to draft Elementals. And +2.2 in Gruul, so maybe there are some flavors of Gruul when the card is fine. Skazbek Scrounger. It's a medium card. It's better probably than most of the commons 2-drops. Especially in red, because red 2-drops are not that great. But it's not something that I would be like heavily prioritizing. Even in Goblins, it's only +0.9. And Goblin has a low win rate. You would want it if it was +3 or something, but it's not. Then we have Goliath the Daydreamer. A solid win rate card that does at its best in Elementals deck with +2.4. And the Red Champion, again, only has the data from Izzet decks, and it's +1.2, which is fine, but not amazing. And then the rest of the rares, Hexing Squelcher, Collective Inferno, Lava Leaper, -9 in Izzet, but someone tried to play it in their elementals enough times that it has a sample size on 70 lands. Just don't play that card. And then we have like a bunch of cards that don't have sample size. Meek Attack, Goblin Chieftain, Goblin Sharpshooter, and Heat Shimmer. Out of those, Goblin Sharpshooter, because it's on special guest, does not have a large sample size, but generic win rate being 60.2 makes me think that Goblin Sharpshooter is a very strong card. It just doesn't have enough of a sample size. Well, Meek Attack probably is just no one puts it in their deck, because why would you? Okay, green commons, and the outstanding one is Assert Perfection. Great in all the color combinations, slightly better in Elves at +3.3, and I really love myself a card that gives +3.3 to the best archetype in the set while being a common. So I'm definitely putting some degree of Assert Perfection is an elf card, even though it's going to be also fine in Kithkin decks at +1.9. Mispetal Council, on the other hand, that card is not generically good. +2.3 in Kithkin, that's the 4/3 that draws a card and costs 1 less if you control a Kithkin. -1.7 in Elves, because it's not synergistic with the type, and also you will not as frequently as you want to be able to play that card for its discounted price, which is important. Okay, Lissalana Informant, 0 in Kithkin decks, so it's fine replacement level, but plus 1.8 for Elves, that's a good result for that card. And it's also not embarrassing in the off-color decks. Miss Shadow Council, by the way, pretty good in the off-color decks. Worth thinking about it, as maybe it's not great in Elves, but every other green deck sort of wants it. And then we have Safe Right Cavalry, +0.9 in Elves, which is good. -1.9 in Kithkin, which is not good. So it's an Elves card. Guildthrief's Embrace. Now this card is nothing like amazing, but -0.5, -0.3 in the supported color pairs, +2 in Gruul. That's fine. And I've seen this card in action in Toronto at the Spotlight. A lot of blowouts in games from that. It's probably the best combat trick of the format, I would say. Yeah, +2 in Gruul is also fine. Then we have Surly Farrier, not good in any of the supported archetypes. -1.3 in Kithkin, which should be technically good, and -3.7 in Elves, which is also not surprising that it's worse in Elves than it is in Kithkin, being a Kithkin itself. Great Forest Druid. Not a card you want to be putting in your supported color combinations, but it has +5.6 in blue-green, which means that blue-green that you want to be drafting is the blue-green deck that wants to be having Great Forest Druids. So +5.6 makes those decks sort of on par with the other color combinations. So pick it highly if you want to go for vivid multicolor based on Simic. Midnight Tilling, +0.8 in Elves, -1.1 in Kithkin. So clearly much better in Elves because you have so many of those graveyard synergies there. Crossroads Watcher, the 3/3 with Trample. Whenever a creature you control enters, it gets +1/+0 until end of turn. -4 in Elves, +0.6 in Kithkin. So it's clearly a Kithkin card. But also +3.9 in Gruul, which means that this can be your early beater in your mid-rangey, chunky creatures Gruul deck. Wildvine Pummeler. Bad numbers in supported ones, fine numbers in the unsupported ones, like +2, +1.3, that kind of number. Dawnsight's Hunter, the 4/2 Flash Reach. 0 in Elves, that's a perfectly replaceable level card in Elves. -4 in Kithkin, you don't want to be playing in Kithkin. And then we have like Tend the Sprigs, which shows minor amount of promise in blue-green, but not enough. It's +0.7, and I want something to be +2, +3 min. And Unforgetting Aim, bad across board at -5, -4. The green uncommons, there are several. Best one in terms of how well it fits into different decks is Pitiless Fists. Fits in every color combination, from +2 in Kithkin to +5.3 in Simic decks. The 4-mana Fight Aura, just a solid card. You can pick it and it keeps you open to drafting those unsupported archetypes because it's just good enough. Prisma Basher, similar-ish story. It's a bit weaker in Elves at +0.8, but this is still +0.8 in Elves is something that I'm happy to be drafting. +1.2 in Kithkin. Yeah, I'm still happy doing that. I'm still happy playing Prisma Basher in any of those decks, especially when I can get one quite late. Moon Vigil Adherence, +3.7 in Elves, which is impressive. It's close there with the top uncommons for Elves in the set. +1.8 for Kithkin, not amazing, but it means the card is playable in the Kithkin decks, which is nice to know. And of course, like some unsupported color combinations don't even have a sample size, but Gruul has in its +2, which makes it fringe playable for me. Virulent Emissary, an elf card, the 1-drop, 1/1 Death Touch. Whenever another creature you control enters, gain +1 life. Really good numbers in Elves with +3.2. Solid numbers in Kithkin at +1.9, but not as solid as the card is in Elves. And then also fine in the unsupported color pairs because Simic has 2.8 on the plus, and Gruul has 2.5 on the plus. Pummeler for Hire. Not really convincing in the mainstream deck. +1.1 in Kithkin, which is, I guess, fine-ish. And -0.4 in Elves, which means that you don't need to really prioritize it if you're playing Elves. However, +5.7 in blue-green and +2.5 in Gruul, so maybe at least you can start noticing them, those pummelers, and try to put them in your off-color decks if you can. Dundulin Weaver. It's a Kithkin. It's a 2/1 for 2. And when it enters, if you have 3 or more creatures, you can return a permanent from your graveyard to your hand. 1.8 in Kithkin, which is fine. 0 for Elves, which is fine again. It's not something that you'd be hooray optimistic to get, but it's not terrible. Outrider, the 4-mana 3/5, can't be blocked by creatures of power 2 or less. And if a creature enters this turn, you can give it +2/+0. And this card, 1.7 in Kithkin, -2.4 in Elves, yet another time showcasing the fact that Elves really want to have as many Elves as physically possible. Then we have Blossoming Defense, the combat trick that gives hexproof. Filler level card, +0.5 in Elves, -0.9 in Kithkin. So nothing to write home about really for that card. It's fine, you can put it in the deck, but it won't make miracles for you. I told you that the combat tricks are not that strong. And Tough with Charge is sort of strong, but I think that it should have been giving Trample in order to be an actually viable card. Because right now you can pump and trade in combat, but it doesn't have the push the damage kind of mode that is easily available for that card, unless you have evasion, of course. Lissalana Dignitary. And this is an Elves card, -4.7 in Kithkin, +2.2 in Elves. So, if you pick it, you know that this card goes mainly in the Elves deck. And this card has the same problem, but even amplified. More concise, -8.6 in Kithkin decks to your power level, but +5.1 for black-green drafters if they pick it. And it's mainly because that turns any match of Magic into this cat and mouse game of how do I force them to sacrifice the Morkan's Eyes a bit earlier? Or can I destroy it with something? Do I have something I can look forward in order to destroy the enchantment before my opponent can sacrifice it and get the Elves? this is often becoming a mini game of playing around Morkan's Eyes. And this is a high praise for an uncommon, I guess. And also, look at the win rate of that card generically, 60.7. And this is mainly because the card will be 95% of the time played in the Elves deck, where it is at its best. Because it's so clear what that card wants you to be doing, and it's so clear that you don't want to put it outside of your Elves decks. So yeah, premier card, but if you pick it, I think it's to some extent funny that people are going to be skeptical about picking Morkan's Loyalist or Eclipsed Elf early in the draft, because, well, I'm shoehorning myself into this Elves lane. And then yet they're happy to pick Morkan's Eyes, which is basically, for all the purposes of it, a multicolor black-green card, realistically, in this set. And don't get me wrong, I believe you if you tell me that, hey, I played it in white-green special brew that had a lot of Elves and it was fine there. Yeah, it will be. 1 in 100 draft, 1 in 200 draft, that kind of ballpark, I guess. And then we have Vinebred Brawler, the 4/2 elf that must be blocked, and when it attacks, gives another elf +2/+1 until end of turn. And it's a fine playable in black-green, 0.7 on the plus, so that's fine. And the rest of those cards are not that amazing. Shimmerwild's Growth does have a higher win rate in Simic decks at +1.8. And it's a small data point I would like to maybe highlight. But we should know that blue-green wants to be vivid and wants to play multiple colors, and Shimmerwild, of course, will naturally feed that strategy, not to mention that you probably also want to be ramping while you do that. And that also helps with that. But then we have cards like Chomping Changeling, Prismatic Undercurrents that just don't pull their weight. Very low generic win rate, -5 to -8 range for both of those cards in every single color pair. And Devoted Druid doesn't have sample size. In terms of green rares and mythics, well, Aurora Awakener is the best of the lot. It has +5 in Kithkin, which is very strong, and +2.5 in Elves, which is not like amazing, but still strong enough in my book. And in Gruul, it has +10, which means Aurora Awakener deck in Gruul is competitive with the supported color pairs. So these are the kinds of cards that, they don't push you to the unsupported color pairs, but having those in your pool, you may at least consider drafting the unsupported color pair, because you already have the cards that are powerful enough for you to dedicate to some weird lane. Then we have Bristlebane Battler, the 2-mana 6/6 with Trample and Ward 2, and whenever creature you control, it enters with 5 -1/-1 counters, and whenever another creature you control enters, while it has a -1/-1 counter, you can remove that counter from the creature. So it will slowly grow and become bigger and bigger. And it's fine in every single deck. It has a high win rate, barely lower than Aurora Awakener, which is a great card. And it has positive win rates in all of them. Apart from Simic, which doesn't even have sample sizes for any of the rares and mythics. That's how rarely the color combination is played. Because if you start Simic, you might as well go full Timur and add red to your equation and have more beneficial payoffs, maybe. Champions of the Perfect, 4-mana 6/6 champion elf. You have to exile your elf as you play it. But then you have a big creature that has a very attractive ability of, whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. So you're going to not run out of gas in that game unless they kill Champion of the Perfect quickly. But yeah, it has good names also in Kithkin at +4.4. The only thing that remains to be seen is, what is the sample size of that? Is that a petite sample size and that's why we see those numbers, or is it a large sample size and we should trust those numbers? Tristan, Callous Cultivator, +5.7 in Elves, +1.8 in Kithkin, making it playable anywhere. Jean-Emmanuel Deprat in Formidable Speaker, +2.7 for Elves, because, it can find a very impactful elf, I don't know, gloom thing, or maybe some other bomb that you can put in your deck freely because you have like Random Manuel to tutor for it. Plus 2.7 in Elves, and plus 1.5 in Kithkin, which makes me happy to play that card in either of the decks. Leaf Crown Visionary, one of the special guests that had enough of a sample size to actually make it. 1.8 in the Elves deck, because Leaf Crown Visionary is an Elf Lord, so there you go. And we have like Selfless Safe Ride, the 5 mana 4/2 with Flash and Convoke that gives creatures of a certain type Hexproof and Indestructible, a good combat trick sort of on a stick. And Sapling Nursery, which is medium numbers, minus 0.3 plus 1 in the supported color pairs. But there is some promise in Gruul decks for that card, plus 2.5. But the rest of them, Mutable Explorer is a perfectly replaceable card, 0, -1, that kind of range, so it doesn't really help that much. Bloom Tender, same story, -1.1, -0.5, doesn't do enough, I guess. And then we have Celestial Reunion and Spry and Mighty, which have relatively bad numbers across board, so no reason to really prioritize those cards when you see them. Wow, we managed to get all the colors, so let's go through the multicolors. Do I have any recommendations for someone who wants to get better at data analysis? I would say practice a bit. Download the 17 lands public data sets and ask yourself some questions and try to answer it. And you know, I'm always somewhere there in Discord or whatever. If you are struggling with some concepts, ask questions. I mean, worst case scenario, I will be too busy to answer. Best case scenario, I will be not too busy to answer and I can give you some insights. But I would say that the best way of doing it is literally start asking questions and trying to find how would I answer that question with numbers. And you can ask random questions. The data sets are so deep right now that you can find so many potential ways of analyzing them. You know, especially with replay data, you can ask very deep questions and try to do it. And with the current level of even ChatGPT, you can do a lot of Python code for your analysis, and they can run quite fast without too much work from your side, because the code will generate itself if you write a good prompt, and you can run it then and then maybe stress test it somewhat by yourself to check if the analysis was done right, and boom, you have your analysis. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's a good thing to start learning by doing things and by asking yourself the question. Okay, so we reached the uncommons, the multicolor cards, and we can start with the commons. And to be fair, when you look at it, obviously the multicolor cards will have 10 possible archetypes, but of course not all of them will be in all of them. First one we have is Merrow Sky Swimmer, and that card is solid. It's really good in Merfolk. It's like a defining card for the Merfolk deck at plus 2.6. It's also fine in those less supported archetypes in Dimir and in Simic. As for the other supported archetypes, it does appear in Izzet, and it has plus 0.5, which is fine. And it does appear in Kithkin, white-green, at minus 0.3, which means it's also fine to put it in those decks. But definitely it's much, much better in your Merfolk deck at plus 2.6. But this is clearly the best of the multicolor cards. Then we have Gangly Stompling. Not amazing and not particularly great in the supported color pairs, but it does have plus 0.3 in Kithkin, which is fine. Minus 0.4 in Izzet, which is acceptable, I guess. -1 in Elves, which is like sort of fringe playable in there, and minus 0.9 in Goblins, which probably means that you shouldn't be playing it there. Does have like plus 1.4 in Simic, but Simic is not the great deck. So I would say more filler than anything, and if there is a deck for it, probably Kithkin is the best home for it. Then we have Wary Farmer, the 3-mana 3/3 Kithkin that lets you surveil every turn where you cast another creature, or when another creature enters the battlefield under your control. And in Kithkin, +1, which is great, which is just what you want. Not amazing in Merfolk, -4, you don't want to be playing there. A good number, like a really solid number. I'm just checking if I read it correctly with my blind eyes, but +5 in Simic, which is solid. That's like literally a card that I'm happy to play in this deck. And not great in Elves, -4. You don't want to be playing it. So basically a Kithkin card mainly, and then some promise in Simic, and maybe in maybe sometimes in Gruul. Mischievous Sneakling, and some people are very high on that. I think Luis was spectacularly announcing that he never cut it from his deck. Well, I've cut it a lot of times from my decks. Maybe there's a difference in how we draft our decks, and I'm not putting many vivid payoffs, which it might be good with. Best in Dimir, and it is a Dimir card, so +2, but Dimir is poor. From the supported archetypes, it's okay in elementals at -0.3, because maybe you want that cheap thing to make you survive till the late game that can trade. But in Merfolk it's -3, in Goblins it's -1.7, in Elves it's -3. Not a card I'm happy to play anywhere. And I think that the main reason for that, for me at least, is that I'm not that keen on 2-drops in this format. I'm playing so few of them because most of the time I don't feel threatened by them. One deck that really can threaten me with small creatures is Goblins, but Goblins have good enough Goblins that they can put, that they don't need the support of Mischievous Sneakling, and also most of the time it doesn't get that much of a boost for having that extra color for your vivid payoffs, because maybe you're going to play the 2-mana elemental that pinks something for the number of colors, but most of the time not much to be gained there. So I'm pretty low on the Mischievous Sneakling, and also like generic game and win rate 52.5, which is not amazing. While Wary Farmer, it's only good in Selesnya, but it's really good in theirs, and it has 55% game and win rate solely on being mainly played in Selesnya, where it's good. So yeah. Prideful Feastling, aka Steve the Lion, according to Christopher Larson. It's fine in white-green at -0.7, but not much apart from that. Not great in Merfolk, not great in Goblins, not great in Elves, and generally slightly middling win rate at 53% for all archetypes if you look at them. Some promise in white, black, and white, red. Maybe the 2/3 body is a very kind recipient of the blight counters if you need them, and also gaining life maybe for the grindier deck is an important thing. But those are not the numbers that make me interested in that card. Flaring Cinder, that's the Izzet signpost common. The 3/2 that lets you ramage when it enters, or where you cast a spell with mana value 4 or greater. And very much like the Wary Farmer, it has around 1 percentage point plus in its color pair. And that's where it should be played. And that's why it has the 55% generic game and hand win rate, because it's good in its color pair, but not good outside of it that much. -4 in Merfolk was pretty bad. -2.5 in Goblins, also not something impressive. So shouldn't be probably playing it. And then we have like Stoic Grove Guide, which has a freakishly high win rate in Gruul at +3.5. And makes me think, well, it does. For green mana, it gives you a black vivid dot, which is maybe important. You want to be playing big creatures, and it has some utility after it dies as well, by making another creature that is also black for anything vivid. But it's actually -3% in Elves. I basically, whenever I have that card in my elf deck, I think I failed as a human and as a draft navigator, because I shouldn't be having it in my deck. I'd rather not. And don't get me wrong, you may remember some games where it was actually fine, but on average, it's just not good enough. Chaos Spewer, pretty bad win rate, 50%. Not good in any deck, not good in goblins. I think that, weirdly, I think that card may have some merit in Vivid decks, especially Vivid decks that want to be playing the Scarecrow, the 1/3, the Mana Dork, the 0/4, because these are very good recipients of your blight counters, that you can cast it for 3 and then it can clog the board until it dies. But I think that this is one where, if the set designers would have made it a 4/5, that card would have been actively so much better. Because for toughness, it trades with a bunch of those 4 power 3 drops that you have in the set. And just flipping the power and toughness would serve what this card wants to be achieving much better, especially given that Goblins is not really an aggressive deck, that it's a deck that wants to play this grindy game. 4/5 would have been so much better, I think. And that card could have been one of the better commons, but right now it's just bad. Chitinous Graspling, Ethan's from Lord of the Rings. Oh no, that's Mani Devuti's spirit animal. And I have bad news for Mani. Unfortunately, not great numbers for that card. 51% win rate and not good in any color combination, and especially not in the supported ones. Just very mediocre card that I'd rather not have to play ever. Okay, and last, Feisty Spikeling, my least favorite of the changelings. Really don't like that card. And it has bad numbers everywhere, which makes me feel vindicated for not liking it. Commando Zako asks, so what does a good black-red deck look like? Black-red has been very interesting, this set between the data and some discourse. I will try to make a deeper dive on how to make things work in the set next episode, when I will have the draft data, because I know the draft data is coming out in a couple of days. Then I can make an analysis of it and I can tell you, paint you the picture. But for now, I think that my good black-red deck will have a couple of bombs, which there are. I mean, we looked at them before. So, you know, Grab's Command, maybe the Champion of the Weird. And I want to load up on as many of the combination of Boggart Mischief and the Signpost Uncommon. Yeah, that's what I want to do. And I want to play a long game. I don't want to be aggressive early because the 2 drops just don't exist for that deck. But I want to focus on like making sure that I do some chip damage early and then later finish off with my Boggart's Mischiefs and whatever the other goblin opponent at some stage will not be even able to attack me because my blocks would kill them. So that's what I want to probably look forward to. All right, multicolor uncommons. And we're going to see a lot of Eclipsed cards here, and they're all great. You know, Eclipsed Elf, good. Absolute reason to play, but only in the Elves deck. There's no numbers for anything else. Deep Channel Duelist, absolutely essential for the Merfolk decks. I think it's more important for those decks than the Marrow, because I think where the Merfolk decks sometimes struggle is the sizing of the creatures. They will be small and they will not be fast enough, and you might lose some races, while Duelist swings that race very much in your favor. But Marrow is also great. The Eclipse Marrow is also great. +7, which is like, you know, this is better than most of the rares. That's why those cards are so important. And these are the cards that I want to be speculating on early in the draft. I want to be picking them and then trying to find the lane based on having a couple of those cards to choose from, because I want those reasons for me in the draft to pick a lane. I don't want to pick Elves just because I got like 3 mediocre Elves early in the draft. I want to have those really top end cards and Eclipse cards. And the Lords for Merfolk and Elves are exactly those cards that I'm looking for. And you have Marrow at 6.9, Eclipse Boggart 6.8. Obviously, Goblins are weaker, But Eclipsed Bogart is still an amazing card, and it will make your deck, significantly more powerful. Morkan's Loyalist +6, another reason to be Elves. This card is so annoying. Curse Crafter, this is one of those cards that I was talking to about Commander Zako. This is the card that I really want to load up on in my Goblins deck for it to be successful. And then we have the hybrid Orzhov card, the Reaping Willow. And that has good numbers across the board. And look at this plus 9.6 in the white-black. I don't want to first pick it and force Orzhov, but anytime I see it late in the draft, I'm super happy to pick it. Because even in Merfolk, it has plus 0.8. In Kithkin, plus 1.2. This is solid numbers. In Elves, plus 0.5. In Goblins, plus 5%. This is a card that is good outside of the Orzhov and amazing in Orzhov and gives me this kind of flexibility. So I really want to pick it early, not as a reason to be an Orzhov, but just because it's a solid card. And if I see it late, I can actually contemplate picking up the Orzhov lane. It didn't happen to me so far, but it happened to some people I've seen. The card, because of the lifelink, is just so strong. Thoughtworth Lieutenant, plus 3.6, which is still perfectly serviceable. Maybe not at the level of the Lords and the Eclipsed cards, but still good enough. Okay, then we have Twin Flame Travelers. This is not as good as, again, this is the same level as the Thoughtworth Lieutenant. Okay in Elementals decks, Twin Flame Travelers, but not that kind of reason card. This is more like a reward card than a reason card. Still, plus 3, very serviceable, and I always want to play it in my decks. It's just not one of those cards that I will see and I will like, yeah, I'll pick it even if I'm not in the lane, just in case that lane is open. Noggle Robber, another solid card. This one not as good as the Reaping Willow, but it is fine in Kithkin at plus 1.1. It is absolutely fine in Elementals at plus 3.3 because it lets you ramp and Elementals want to spend a lot of mana in the deck. Plus 6 in Gruul because then it's basically a no mana problem card and still good. And plus 2.4 in Elves, which is maybe something I missed myself in the draft before I saw this data. I thought it would not be that strong in Elves, and I often passed it. And I think I'm going to start picking it more highly for that reason, that it actually has good numbers in the Elf decks. Then we have Eclipsed Kithkin, which is a bit lower on the agenda, mainly because people play it more in the splash decks where it doesn't perform as well. Because it has 0... in Merfolk, which means it's just fine in the Merfolk deck, and minus 1.9 in Elves, which means that maybe you shouldn't play it in Elf decks, but plus 9.2 in Kithkins is absolutely tremendous in that deck. So yeah, a super good card, and this is exactly a reason for me to pick it. And if I'm in Kithkin, I'm super happy. If I'm not in Kithkin and I end up in Merfolk, I'm still okay with playing it 1 copy in my deck because it's just 2 pips that I need to pay for that, and I will have a good 80% chance of drawing a card when I cast it. Flamekin, similar, it's played in more decks because of the lower mana requirement. Actually decent numbers in Gruul at plus 4, but plus 6.3 in Elementals. This is another of those cards I want to pick early before I find my lane in order to have one of those power cards. So I still consider it a power card. Then we have Hovel Hurler, the 5 mana giant that is a 6/7 for 5, but comes with 2 -1/1 counter, and you can remove a counter from it by paying some mana and give something flying until the turn at +1/+0. I like it in some of the decks. I like it in my sort of Mardu kind of deck, and the numbers confirm it. It's like plus 1.7 in white-black, but it's not good enough for me to be a reason to be in those decks. It will be annoying sometimes, and it has okay numbers in Goblins at 0.3, okay numbers in Kithkin at 0.4, minus 0.4, but it's not like a prized uncommon based on the numbers here. And we have the Voracious Tome Skimmer. I did trophy with that one in my Grixis Fairy Mentals with splash of green for Maralin. Plus 5.7 in Dimir. And this is really, as someone said in the chat earlier in the stream, this is really the reason to be Dimir. The only good reason to be Dimir. Because 3 Dimir hybrid cost is hard to play anywhere else. And the ability of drawing a card whenever you cast a spell during an opponent's turn is pretty strong. Especially that there's just a good enough base of cards that will help you to do that, or add additional bonuses for you, like Surveil 2 on the 2/1 fairy, for example. And this card eats removal like crazy. But if it survives and you draw a couple of cards, you're so much ahead in that game. So this, and maybe, the Bitter Blossom or the Bitter Blossom on the stick, these are the reasons to be sort of Dimir. And the last card that actually has any kind of numbers is Glisser Bear. And it's not amazing numbers anywhere. But I think that despite what numbers tell you, this card has its spots. I found it quite good in heavy blue elementals decks, because it gives me almost automatically spots me a 3rd color when I cast it, and I can start attacking with my small thing that becomes bigger and big enough to be actually threatening life total, while keeping other things behind, so I have that defensive speed as well. But it's not going to be every deck. It's going to be rarely good, and I think maybe we will play that card too often, and that's why the numbers are bad. And from the other cards that we have here, Risen Reef maybe is worth mentioning because it has 61% game in hand win rate, which is a very high game in hand win rate. It just doesn't have a sample size because it's on the special guests. But it's definitely a card that you want to be playing in blue-red elementals, and maybe in some kind of a blue-green vivid elemental concoction, sort of Timur adjacent. So it's a very strong card in the format, not enough data to show exactly where it's at its best. And we end up with rares, and then there's a bunch of rares that are really strong, starting with Ashling Command. Despite being featured in 3 decks, in Merfolk, in Elementals, and in Goblins, which you would see that, playing it as an off-color splash would diminish its power, it still is up there. 66% win rate, that's just bomb level. That's mythic level, kind of like top mythic level win rate for a rare. Plus 13 in Elemental decks. And then plus 7.6 in Goblins and plus 5.8 in Merfolk. It's just a super good card. Again, showing that picking it doesn't mean that you have to be blue-red. You can happily play it in other color combinations. Then we have Grub's Command. Again, plus 12 in Goblins, just amazing numbers. And there's many loops that you can also do with that card. And still plus 4 with Izzet. So this card, despite, part of its charm is being milling cards and putting goblin cards milled into your hand, and maybe you won't have that option when you're playing it in Izzet, still giving creatures some bonus and killing something, or maybe making a copy of one goblin that you have is fine enough to play it as a splash. But obviously you want to be playing it in black-red most of the time. Same thing with Figure of Fable, plus 10 in white-green, because it requires a lot of white and green mana, but still plus 6.7 in Merfolk and plus 7.6 in Elves, which is more than good. It's actually bomb level in those decks as well. Not as good as in when you can, every mana taps for upgrading it, but not far off. So great card. Like, this is one of those bombs that I want to be picking as well because of the flexibility. Same with Sanar, Innovative First Year. Plus 6, plus 7, plus 7 in respectively Merfolk, Elementals, and Goblins. So it actually is even better in Goblins, just casting it for red 2, than it is in Izzet, marginally, but something. It's another one of those bombs that I want to be picking early because they not only keep me flexible, but are very powerful at the same time. And again, same thing with Vibrance. Good in Elementals, good in Goblins, good in Gruul, not as good in Elves, because you really don't want to be casting it for green 3. You want to be casting it for red 3, because a 4/4 that deals 3 damage is great. And obviously in Gruul you can get both, that's fantastic. But you definitely want to get the red part of it. Hyperfect Morkant, +6 in Elves. It's a good Elves card. Sometimes annoyingly, you don't want the opponent to blight because they can remove the counters to get some value. Brigade's Command is fine in Kithkin, +6, more than fine even. So that's a solid card. Tristan's Command, amazing in Elves, +9.6, but it's also splashed in Kithkin with good results at +2.3. And these are like the absolute peak. Those cards are peak. Ashling's Command, Grub's Command, Figure of Fable, Sanar, Vibrance, Hyperfect Morkant, and Brigade's Command and Tristan's Command. These are the peak. Maybe Wistfulness joins that team, and it's good, in anything that can cast it for blue, basically. And it's still fine if you can cast it for green and destroy, I don't know, Liminal World or whatever it's called, the Oblivion Ring. And then we have the second tier. They're still amazing cards, but not universally amazing. And Deceit in Dimir, that's the reason to draft Dimir apart from the Fairy. +13.7. That's amazing. Because you want to probably have both effects when you cast Deceit. In Elementals, where sometimes you will be able to cast it for full value when you have Flame Braider, +5, which is fine. In Black-Red, +5.4, which means casting a 6 mana Thoughtseize 5/5 is probably good enough. And then in Elves, +3.6, still good enough, I would say, to always include it in your deck. So, solid card. Maralen is more limited to where you can play it. 6.4 in Black-Green. Obviously, it's a 3-color card, which means that you have to play it in a splash deck, which makes me think it's stronger than you think, because sometimes with the splash card you draw it and you can cast it if you didn't have a right combination of lands on board. And in blue-black also +4.8, which sort of makes it a reason to also go in the mirror for that lane. We talked about Wistfulness, and then we have those lower impact rares, still great though. Abigail, best in white-green, but also good. Oh, actually, best in Goblins, shockingly. +5.9 in Goblins, +5.2 in Elves, +5.2 in Kithkin. So really solid everywhere, just not as solid as some of them. It doesn't have those insane numbers like +11 or +9. It just has +5s across the board. And maybe slightly less good in Merfolk. And this comes back to the reason why I think that the Lord is good in Merfolk, because Merfolk creatures are just too small. And giving a 2/1 flying and first strike is not as impressive as giving like a 4/4 or a 5/5, the same ability. Then we have Doran. In Kithkin it has +5.3, in Elves +2.2. Probably because, your Elves, you want to play streamlined Elves, and Kithkin you can play maybe some different variety of a deck. But of course it's a 3-color card, so there are some problems with this data in terms of analysis capability. 6 command, the Merfolk command, +3.7. I mean, you will never cut it from your Merfolk deck. You're going to be actively happy that you have it, but maybe not like super amazing. Emptiness, and it's funny how you see from this data which part of the elemental, of this mythic elementals, is the important one. So if we go like Vibrance, clearly the red part is important. Deceit, the black part is important. Wistfulness, the blue part, is probably the most important one. In terms of emptiness, well, in white-black deck, it's +8.7. So clearly having both options is great. But in the purely white colors, it's actually a minus card. -2 in white-blue, -2 in white-green. So casting it as a 6 mana 3/5 that brings back a 3-drop from your graveyard to the battlefield is far from good. You really want to focus on getting the black part of it. So if you draft emptiness, you want to focus on playing black as your main color. Because in black-green it's +5.5, In black-red, it's plus 1.2. In white-black, obviously, it's plus 8.7. So yeah, both is better. Deepway Navigator, that's already a card that is not like amazing. 2 flash, untap all your merfolks at DDB is not very threatening, as I said, merfolks are not big. And whenever you attack with 3 or more merfolk this turn, merfolk you control get +1/+0. It's a hard thing to fulfill without, losing some of your board, which, is not amazing compared to the Lord, which just gives them +1/+1 whatever happens. But still +1.4, which is good enough. It can surprise someone at some stage. Lorwyn, Imperfect Naturalist. If hopefully I got the Welsh pronunciation of the name correctly, because I assume that Lorwyn is Welsh. Plus 5.5 in Elves decks, and not that great outside of it. Still 0.9 in Kithkin. That's okay, but not amazing. Don't expect miracles from that card. But in Elves, it's a bomb. It's like they're on the level with High Perfect Morkant, with the Eclipsed Elf and things like that. Bree of Clan Stout Arm, +6 in white-red, because you can easily cast her. But also +2 in Kithkin, so it's worth splashing in my book if you pick your Bray and put it in your white-green deck. And I had success in playing in this Naya space. Maybe red-green splashing Bray or white-red splashing Bray was fine. Not white-red, but white-green splashing Bray. Catharsis is fine in white-red, +5%. And maybe a reason for drafting white-red. But this one doesn't have a good side. It's not good in Merfolk, so white side clearly not good, -5% there. It's like actively bad card in those decks. And in blue-red, it's still -0.9, so you don't want also to cast it for the red. You want to cast it as the full package of white, red, which might happen in some of those elemental decks when you have a Flame Raider again, or Ashling. Kirill, Attentive First Year, some people swear by that card, but, nothing impressive. Best home is weirdly probably Elementals, where it has -0.2, which again is fine for me to play a card like that, especially if I get it relatively late. Kirill is just fun, and I do agree with that. If you want to have fun, that's the card that you want to be playing in your deck, because it does make fun things. You can cast your Vivid thing and copy the trigger twice or whatever. It's also fine in white-red at +3, so not the reason really. Not strong enough. I'd rather have the Catharsis or Bray for that, but okay, let's put it like that. And then we have Tam, a Mindful First Year. It's fine in Elementals, and I think that it's fine in Elementals because if you draft Tam, you will try to position yourself to be more in the Vivid flavor of the Elementals, and of course that can give you Vivid 5 just like that, which is a great ability. And as a Giver of Runes, it's more annoying than great, because it's a 2-drop in the end. Giver of Runes is a 1-drop, that's his main charm. And it doesn't give protection on blocks, it just gives protection from spells, which is very different in terms of being an ability. Still, plus 1.4 is something I'm happy to play in my Elementals, but for example in Merfolk it's -1.1, which is like fringe playable. And in Kithkin it's -3.5, which means I'd rather have just a regular common 2-drop than this. And Shadow Urchin, fine in Goblins. That card. That's the 3-drop with hybrid Rakdos mana and the cost. And whenever it attacks you, Blight. And lastly, we have Dream Harvest, Paul Chion's Dream Shatterer, but on average, it's just a 50% card. That's not good enough. You should not be putting it in your deck. I did early in the format, but hey, you do things for science in that stage. And if you don't want to put it in your deck, especially don't put it in your Merfolk deck when it's -5.5, which is bad. And look at that. We reached the full spoiler. We talked about almost every card in the set in the context of what is the best home for that. And use this data as a sort of like food for thoughts. Think about do I put cards that are not good in this particular color pair more frequently than I want? For example, do I put the 5/4 elf, the Stoic Growth Guide, in my elf decks way too often? And maybe that costs me some of the win rates. Do I draft my elf decks in such a way that I end up with those Stoic Growth Guides? That means probably that you have a deck full of filler. And that's maybe the reason why they're done trophying. Or do you draft and you play the Stoic Growth Guide, but you only do it when you have so much good top end that it doesn't really matter because it's just a replaceable card. And asking yourself questions like that eventually helps you to figure out the format better. And that's what I want you to achieve from those episodes. Like, give you the context of every card so that you can position yourself in where I can improve, which cards I underappreciated, which cards I should maybe put more attention to in the draft because they keep me open for those non-supported archetypes. Because I think that you should not plan to be in the non-supported archetypes, but having them in your repertoire is going to be an important reason for ending up fewer drafts with train wrecks. And I think that if you go all in on the archetype and it turns out not to be very open, one of those supported ones, it's a very, very easy way of train wrecking a draft. Okay, hopefully you enjoyed that. I will clock off because I'm absolutely shattered by that stage. I already had 8 hours of lectures earlier today and I had a coaching session in between. So I think this is my hour 12 of talking to people and in front of a PowerPoint of some sorts. And I think I deserve a sleep now. So thank you very much for being here, and I'm going to send you somewhere right now. And I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.